grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. It's time for the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 16 preview of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. It is the last week of the fantasy season. I can't believe it's here already. I'm here joined with Paul Deal, who's back after a couple weeks. Paul, say hi to the fantasy listeners out there.
How's everybody doing? Good to be back with you.
So we have, like I said, the last episode of the season here, at least the last week preview, because we're not doing a preview for Week 17. Friends don't let friends play in Week 17.
Definitely not.
I was talking with some of the guys who might do like a little round table finish the year type of thing. Get a case of beer and a pizza and just finish out the season a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on your wherever you get this podcast from.
If you're like me too, you're not in the championship game this week, so you're looking to figure out who you're going to be targeting next year in the draft. And like me, I'm thinking of moving on from Todd Gurley next year and not keeping him. I think his useful life is over as a top 3 running back, so I think I'm going to move on next year. But that's for Week 17.
In a keepers league, you're not going to keep Gurley.
No, I'm out. I'm done. I'm off the Gurley train.
Damn, that's brutal, man. Well, the other thing we might do is like a playoff daily fantasy podcast where we pretty much, me and Adam, just sit here and talk about the single game rosters that you can build throughout the playoffs. Maybe do just one for Week 17 to kind of finish out the regular season. And speaking of daily fantasy, Adam, tonight is Wednesday. I'm here with Paul, and last night Adam came by and we recorded the daily fantasy section for Week 17. So we'll be dropping that in right here in part 1, right after we finish our Cheers to You Pour One Out section. And just to give you the rundown of the games that we'll do here in part 1, we got the 2 Saturday games, and then we'll finish up the NFC East, the AFC South, and the AFC West games here in part 1. And then we'll take a break, and we'll come back in part 2, and we'll do the AFC North, the NFC South, the AFC East, the NFC North, and the NFC West. So that's little tidbits for you if you want to, try and look around for certain games. I know in the championship, you might only have players in maybe 4 or 5 of these previews. So trying to make it easy for you guys here in the last week of the season. And like I said, we're going to kick off here. Actually, you know what? Let's take a second here and we'll just kind of go through how the championship season is going for us so far. Paul, I know you had mentioned, unfortunately, you lost in the first round of the playoffs. Who killed you? Who played well? What happened?
I had a team that really just snuck into the playoffs as the 6th seed there. I think it was at a losing record overall. I might have been like 6-7 getting into the playoffs.
Shame.
Oh yeah, big time shame. And then guys that I needed to show up just didn't. That was the week Gurley and the Rams went up to Chicago and played the Bears. So that was a big nothing week from Todd Gurley.
Todd, yeah.
And then I just ran into a speeding bullet with Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, had a 97-yard touchdown that week on my opponent's team.
Oh, that's right.
And his whole team has just really caught fire. So the guy I lost to in the first round of the playoffs is now in the championship game, and I think he'll end up winning the championship game this week. So if you do lose in fantasy, it's good to lose to the eventual champ.
Yeah. It feels really horrible when you lose to the guy who then gets blown out in the championship for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I made the playoffs in 4 of my 6 leagues. Lost in the first round in one of them. In the other 3, I had Keenan Allen and Aaron Jones in 2 of those 3. So things did not go very well for me in the one league. I lost, I think, by 20 or something points. So I still had a chance at the end, but Zach Ertz really underperformed for me. And then in the other league that I had, that same duo, Keenan Allen and Aaron Jones, I was able to survive, thank God, because I had Todd Gurley and Dalvin Cook in my lineup, so they carried me through the first round. So I'm in the championship in 1 of my 6 leagues. Not the best ratio, not the ratio I was going for going into this season, but when two of your best three players get hurt in the first quarter of the game, you know, it's just the way she goes sometimes, man. It's just the way she goes. So that's how our season's going. I hope everybody that's listening, you're most likely only listening if you're in the championship. So, you know, good luck to you. But let's take a second and go through our cheers to you and pour one out here for week 16. My first cheers is to Derrick Henry. He followed up that massive 200-plus yard, 4-touchdown game with another good game, 170 yards, 33 carries, a career game for him, really, as far as volume goes. You know, hopefully the Titans saw this and went, maybe we should do that next year. You know, what they should have done this past offseason and they failed to do. Another guy down in the AFC South, Marlon Mack, after 5 of his last 6 games with under 10 points, he goes out and has a 27-point game for you. You're gonna hear me mention this in the DFS lineup because he's one of the guys that me and Adam both really like this week. It seems like they really put an attention to getting back to running the ball when they got some of their offensive linemen back. So he had a great game. So I'm cheersing to you, Marlon Mack. Another guy, is it Damian Williams?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Damian Williams.
Steps in for Spencer Ware, who is playing because of the Kareem Hunt situation. He puts up 27 points himself. He had a great game. I played against him in that one league that I lost with Keenan Allen and Aaron Jones. Keenan Allen on that Thursday night game puts up to 0, and I look over on the other side of the matchup, and Damian Williams has 27 points, and Justin Jackson has 17 points. So it did not go well for me in that league from the kickoff on Thursday night. Another guy I'm cheersing to is Telvin Coleman, 145 yards on 11 carries. He looked great, and we got news that Ito Smith is on IR, so no more Ito Smith going forward. Telvin Coleman is going to be a free agent after the season. Does he go out in these next 2 games and show that he can be, a primary ball carrier for another team? They got a good matchup as well, so I'm cheersing to you, Telvin Coleman. Another guy, Dalvin Cook. The Vikings fire your boy John DeFilippo, and the following week, Cook has a season high in carries and yards, 19 attempts for 136 yards. It's the game that all the Dalvin Cook drafters have been waiting for all season long, and hopefully, if you were patient enough with him, he paid off. So I know you got a couple Eagles that you want to cheers to. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey, quarterback change, and he goes off for 8 targets, 8 receptions, 160 yards, and no touchdowns. But, I mean, he looked dominant out there. And I heard
element of the game that I feel like that was there all season long last year that wasn't there this year ball. Was that deep ball to Alshon Jeffrey, and we saw Nelson Aguilar get one too.
Yeah.
So it looks like Foles is bringing that back into the offense.
Seriously, they put up a set of like a word bubble, I guess, during the game of what Foles' teammates said about them, and the one on there was gunslinger, and you saw as soon as he stepped into the game, he wasn't afraid to throw deep, even after he took like a couple huge shots, like one from Donald, and then the one that Alshon caught deep that he mossed 2 Rams defenders and also his own teammate because Nelson Aguilar was back there with him. He jumped up between all 3 of those guys and took the ball. So it was like a 25-25-25 ball, and he came down with it.
Yeah, you're right. Nick Foles was getting beat up in that game.
Yeah, he was getting hammered. So I'm cheersing to Alshon for finally coming out, showing out, and I think he has a pretty decent matchup this week against the Texans to potentially do it again if Foles gets the ball downfield to him. And then I'm cheersing to Nick Foles. I mean, this dude in December, when the Eagles need to make a run and find some magic, I mean, St. Nick just brings it. He didn't have that great of a game in terms of no touchdowns. He threw that one silly interception to Aqib Talib. But, I mean, he went out there and beat the Rams in L.A. in primetime football. Eagles were 13-point dogs going into the game. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I never felt in doubt of the Eagles coming out of that game with a win once I saw the fire that Nick Foles seemed to have in his eyes.
He's got such an interesting career, man. He's kind of like this career journeyman who has had some really good moments in certain teams. Like even
he had 27-2 the 1 year with the Eagles under Chip Kelly.
And didn't he have, up until Sam Bradford did it last year, but didn't he have the career the record for like the career complete, or he had some weird record for a while.
He's got 7 touchdowns in a game.
Okay, maybe that's the one.
Which is a record that I think is only tied by like Peyton Manning or someone else like
Peyton
that.
Manning and that dude who went from the Raiders to he was a Packer, and then he went to the Raiders, and then he went to the Seahawks, and Russell Wilson beat him out. He was a quarterback. Can't remember his name. Matt Flynn. Yes.
Flynn, yes.
Just needed a minute to
connect all the dots.
But and then he's a backup, and he goes and wins the freaking Super Bowl. He's the Super Bowl MVP, and then he has this chance over this past offseason to go get paid somewhere. And people are killing him because, he already wins the Super Bowl. He has a chance to go get a big contract somewhere, and he doesn't. He wants to stay with the Eagles. Yep. And they give him this incentive-based contract. And look at it. He started the first, 2 or 3 games?
He started the first 2 games, went 1-1.
And then now he's going to play in the last 3 games. And if they get to the playoffs, I'm sure he's going to end the season with a pretty nice payday.
His contract incentives, from what I've heard this week, for each start, it's $250,000 and another $250,000 for every win. So Sunday night, he made a cool $500,000.
Oh, okay.
And has the potential to make, in these last 3 games, $1.5 million if he wins them all.
Right.
So,
and then I think I thought I remember there was also incentives in there for like touchdown passes.
Oh,
there all kinds of stuff.
There probably absolutely is.
So yeah, I mean, he's gonna finish the season, and I think looking at what he just did to the Rams, I think he's gonna finish strong, man. And
certainly hope so.
I'm sure there's gonna be plenty of teams that are gonna be interested in him in the offseason. So
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we're talking up Nick Foles right now, but to me, Carson Wentz is still the guy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, the way that I look at it is Carson Wentz tore his ACL last December. He started doing football activities at really the end of training camp, and then they brought him back after Nick Foles loses to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because I think the team just panicked.
Right.
They're like, we can't do this season. But then, I mean, now hindsight's 2020. They probably wish they left Foles in there because the season hasn't amounted to really anything. They're fighting for their lives, so you could have just let Carson recover. Carson came back and looked okay. I mean, he was putting up big numbers, but he never, to me, really looked healthy enough like he was last year. He wasn't as mobile as he was, and then now this whole back thing's coming out. To me, the Eagles actually have a history of just shutting guys down with like these weird injuries that come up. They had a rookie a couple of years ago, Donnell Pumphrey, that he was playing in the preseason, got a concussion, and they put him on the IR with a concussion, which is like you kind of don't see a concussion last an entire season,
right?
And be an IR type injury. But he
unless
was a rookie.
Your name is Javid Best,
right? He was a rookie. They didn't want to put him on the practice squad because they thought someone might take him off their practice squad. So they were able to put him on the IR and kind of stash him away for a year. So
I guess it makes sense as far as a roster construction.
Right. And I mean, the Eagles losing in Dallas, they kind of thought their season might have been over by that point.
Right.
So yeah, shut Carson down, let him get healthy, figure it out. He's not going to get rustier by not playing. So you're able to just ride with Nick Foles. You think you're going to get blown out by the Rams, but
you kept him for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And you knew going into the season that a dude coming off of an ACL is, a one awkward landing away from missing a couple games. Yep. And, we've seen so many times, like this year with Dalvin Cook, we saw the hamstring and the ankle. Like, it's just, I feel like those ACL injuries always lead to something else, whether it's a hip or something, a calf. It's always something. And I just feel like the only thing you need to look at is Robert Griffin III. He gets hurt in the playoff game that year, and then there was the whole thing all in for week 1. Right. They rushed him to get into week 1, or he probably rushed himself. Mm-hmm. And he pretty much killed his career, man. Right. He's been nothing since then. And I just think teams need to start looking at that and be more careful. Like, these quarterbacks are gold, and especially somebody like Carson who went out and showed us that he's electric and he can make plays.
Yeah.
So we're going to finish up the Cheers to You section here with Kalen Ballage. We saw Frank Gore go down, and Ballage comes in, gets 12 carries, and turns him into 123 yards. He looked really good, and we're going to kind of use him as a transition point into our Pour One Out section, which we're going to start with Kenyon Drake, who has been on this section a lot this podcast.
He lived on it. My man's like drowning in beer. It's just been poured out all over him.
He's just been poured beer on every week. I'm so sorry,
Should
Kenyon
give
Drake.
him a boat.
Dude, like this guy, Gore goes down, as I just mentioned, and Kenyon Drake finishes the game with 1 carry, 4 total touches. It's so fitting that we end the season with him on the Pour One Out section here. I was talking about it with Adam last night. Over the past couple of years, we've seen the Dolphins move on from Lamar Miller, and then we saw him trade away Jay Ajayi, and it just seemed like this was the season where they were going to finally say, Kenyon Drake, you're our guy. And now let's bring in a 35-year-old running back, and he's going to lead the team in carries and rush yards. And it sucks, man.
It's a week after the Miami Miracle, like they're calling it, and you give this man no love. He just there's all the report, like the quotes coming out after the game that he walked off against the Patriots, and he was saying, the team came up to me after, and coach said they drafted me to beat the New England Patriots. Well, that's unfortunate because that's the only team I guess you're going to be playing against. Yeah. And you can just be on the bench the rest of those games.
So next year, only draft Kenyon Drake with the knowledge that he's only going to do good against the Patriots. Yep. So 2 out of the 16 or 15 or 16 games there. So yeah. Moving on to our next Pour One Out, it's going to be to the Jaguars DST. They lost to Josh Johnson and the Redskins, 4th string quarterback. The guy was eating potato chips on the couch a month ago, and he comes in and beats the frickin' Jaguars. I don't care who's playing offense. If allowing Derrick Henry to have a 99-yard rush wasn't embarrassing enough, they said, let's go out and crap the bed even worse against Josh Johnson.
At home, too.
Crazy, man. So I'm pouring one out to all of you that wear a Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. You guys...
I think the Redskins
need to step it up, man.
Were over in the Jay Gruden tenure when trailing at halftime, too.
And this was the only game?
They were trailing at halftime in this game and came back to win.
Like, how does that happen, dude? This is a defense that has multiple Pro Bowlers at every level.
Yeah.
Every single level.
This is a team...
By far the best tandem of corners.
Yeah.
By far.
Right. Everyone was talking about their linebackers last year, that they were the greatest linebackers. Their defensive line is always revered with Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue. But then I look at this team and think they just quit. I mean, they really thought they were the creme de la creme after the AFC Championship game last year. They thought they should have been in the Super Bowl, and this year everyone's just punched them in the mouth, and they could not respond.
I thought, because I played the Jags in one of my daily fantasy lineups last week, and I thought after that game against Tennessee with 10 days off, I was like, all right, they're going to come out and they're playing Josh Johnson.
Light them up.
I was like, they are going to kill these Redskins. And that wasn't the case at all, man. I think you're dead right. I think they just quit, bro. I think they packed it in weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
Moving on to Saquon Barkley, he only caught 4 of his 10 targets for 25 yards last week. He was playing Tennessee. It's a good matchup, but still, Saquon is one of the guys that I think the overwhelming consensus next year is he's going to be a top 3 to 5 pick.
That's why I'm getting rid of Gurley next year.
Oh, yeah? You got Barkley?
I'm going Barkley.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I can roll with that. The next one is another young running back, actually the first undrafted rookie to make the Pro Bowl. Philip Lindsay, 18 touches last week, only 44 yards. So congrats to him to making the Pro Bowl, but not a good week last week. So pouring one out to you for this week, but I'm cheersing to you for the course of the season because you've looked great. Mm-hmm. You're a lot of fun to watch. The next one is Amari Cooper. After 26 catches in the past 3 weeks, he follows up with only 4 catches for 32 yards last week. Puts up a stinker. I guess he can forgive him after giving you 40 points on Thanksgiving and then another 30 something 2 weeks later. So I'm pouring one out to you for this week, though.
He just kills the NFC East. I mean, the Redskins he lit up on Thanksgiving. He's lit the Eagles up the 2 games that he's got to play them this year. So, I mean, since coming over from the Raiders, like everyone puts the stats up of like what he's done. But I think you could probably just look at the end, like how many games were against NFC East opponents, and those are the games that like he's just blown up.
That's interesting.
He has I try to pull it up real quick. So
all right.
Amari Cooper played most of his career. Again, it is a short career in the AFC West.
Right.
He has 7 career touchdowns against the AFC West. In a short period of time against the NFC East, he has 6 career touchdowns. So that just gives you a sense of how much he's really come on in divisional matchups that the Cowboys were in.
Wow. That's a crazy stat, man. On the fly. Good stuff.
Stats.
Paul dropping it over here. Speaking of dropping it, as I mentioned, Aaron Jones, Keenan Allen, these are the ultimate pour one outs for me, to you guys. Just
lumps
killed
of
me.
coal. 2 lumps of coal right before the holidays.
0.8 points between 2 guys. That was my 0 RB league, so I was, super proud of myself that, the running back that I got in the 7th or 8th round ended up being one of my, starting running backs throughout the entire season. But he goes down with a knee injury, and then we see Keenan Allen, who over the past, I think it's 5 weeks, had caught a touchdown, really turned it around, had a couple guys trying to snag him from me in trade offers, and I stuck through him through the 7 or 8 week span where he didn't have any touchdowns. And then he leaves the game with a hip pointer. And it's almost like I wish it was either like, a concussion, and then we find out on Thursday that he's fine, he's going to play, or it was something worse where it's, the season's over. Because now I don't know what the hell's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to be able to play, and he plays on Saturday. So, I guess the situation is as good as it can be. It's either he plays and I play him on Saturday, or he doesn't and I don't. But, it's just frustrating not knowing whether or not I should be looking for, I picked up an extra wide receiver just in case. I got Mike Williams, but then again, it is the Ravens. So I don't know if I can really even play Mike Williams in that matchup. So, it really sucks, man. They really killed me. So I'm pouring one out to both of those guys. Been riding them all season, and they just shot me in the back. So why don't we move on to the aforementioned Redskins coming off that big win against Jacksonville, playing the Titans, who won a slugger in playing the Giants. I think that game finished 17-0.
Yeah, that was a sloppy game up there in the pouring rain in New York. So jumping right into this Redskins matchup at the Tennessee Titans. Looking at your Redskins players first, I'm not expecting Redskins players to really be a factor. Jordan Reed is not practicing, so in typical Jordan Reed fashion, when you need him, he's injured and most likely not going to play.
Right.
Jeremy Sprinkle was their touchdown magnet last week. He's a third-string tight end. So
he does have a pretty sweet touchdown celebration, though.
Yeah, and a pretty sweet name. I mean, Jeremy Sprinkle is a guy that I would go to battle with any day of the week.
At least it's not Jeremy Twinkle,
Right.
It's like it's Sprinkle. It's cool.
But regardless, Redskins tight ends are going up against the number 1 tight end defense. The Titans are allowing the fewest points to tight ends. So if you need tight end help for your championship game, do not look at the Redskins for that. Adrian Peterson, maybe he's been on your bench. Maybe you've used him for favorable matchups. He's going up against a tough defense this week. Titans are in the top 5 of fewest points allowed to running backs. They're number 3 against the run. So AP, not a great matchup. Chris Thompson has not been the Chris Thompson he was last year. So, again, I'm avoiding Redskins running backs for championship games this weekend.
Yeah, Chris Thompson's usage in the pass game has been nothing like it was last year.
No.
And that's pretty much really the only thing you can count on looking at him, especially in PPR leagues, and it just hasn't been there.
I was so excited because I drafted him in a standard league, but I knew that Alex Smith is like check down Charlie. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. Because even though it's not PPR, he's going to get a ton of yardage and probably a bunch of touchdowns in the red zone when Alex Smith's just dinking and dunking.
This draft
all the way down the
this
field.
was before they got Adrian Peterson too. I'm
Right.
sure, right?
Yeah.
'Cause they were
No, it was.
This was when they were still rolling with Geis.
Right.
So
Yeah. So yeah, it's been unfortunate for Chris Thompson fans and owners that he hasn't done much this year, but don't expect that to change for championship weekend. The one Redskin that I'm kind of interested in is Jamison Crowder.
Yep.
Since coming back, he leads the team in receptions over the past 3 weeks. The Titans are letting up the 10th most points to wide receivers. So if you do need some potential flex help in a PPR or, potentially even standard format, but I would say that's touchdown dependent, Jamison Crowder could be someone you lean on for a wide receiver 3 or even a flex spot.
I agree.
And then jumping over to the Titans now, Corey Davis has 100 targets on the year. The next closest on the team is Deion Lewis with 59.
Wow.
So Corey Davis is getting a lot of looks.
He's not doing anything.
Right, exactly. He was someone that I've always put on like my get your ass on the bench or pour one out. Corey Davis has just let me down since I drafted him earlier this year. Of course, the one big game he has in the early part of the season when he was still on my roster was against the Eagles when he went off. But he's obviously getting looks. The Redskins are in the top 10 of points allowed to wide receivers. They're letting up the 9th most points. Corey Davis is probably going to get matched up on Josh Norman. They do have talent in the Redskins secondary, but Corey Davis is getting a lot of looks. So who knows? If you need to take a flyer on someone and there's not a lot of other options, who knows? Maybe you try out Corey Davis.
He's got to have the least production among any players that have 100 targets.
I would probably say that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Damn.
So, you're rolling the dice and hoping it's a game that those targets lead to something. But in most cases, and I'm not going to shy away from this, Corey Davis has just continued to let me down. So
yeah,
I'd have a hard time playing him. But Derrick Henry, it continues to be a feast for him. We just cheers to him. So as Derrick Henry's been feasting, Deion Lewis has kind of gotten the scraps. You've kind of see his production go down in terms of targets and I think usage overall. Washington's fairly decent against the run. They're right there in the middle of the pack in terms of points allowed, but I think Derrick Henry and what the Titans are doing right now is just really playing tough December football. In December, you got to start really just playoff football overall. You got to be able to run the ball and play defense. They obviously play defense well because they just shut the Giants out. And Derrick Henry has come on very strong of late running the ball. So you see them making a clear focus to run the ball. I don't think that will change. I think it's been benefiting their entire team, focusing and giving the ball to Derrick Henry more. So if Derrick Henry is on my team, I'm playing him as a definite running back to flex option.
Yeah, to me, same thing. It's the only guys you can really play in this matchup is Derrick Henry, and then if you have to at wide receiver, it's Crowder, Corey Davis.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one of the other Saturday game. It's the Ravens playing the Chargers on Saturday night. I'm super excited about this game. This game's going to be awesome, I feel like. On the Ravens side of the ball, you can keep rolling out Lamar Jackson, man. He keeps giving you that awesome floor with his rushing, another 95 yards last week. He's been very consistent with his pass yardage. It hasn't been a lot, but he's been very consistent, right around 130 to 140 passing yards. He got the passing touchdown last week. So, I was struggling last week between Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers, and I made the choice, went with Lamar Jackson, and I think he finished with maybe 4 or 5 points more. So it wasn't the biggest difference there, but it was enough. So I'm rolling with Lamar Jackson again. And then Gus Edwards, I think, is the running back to play for the Ravens. Last week, 20 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, Kenneth Dixon did get 12 touches of his own, 50 yards. Looked pretty good. I think he's become the goal line back. But they went to him. They went to Gus Edwards in the fourth quarter to really seal the game up. So,
and all they're doing is running the ball.
Yeah, they lead the league in rushing over the past since Lamar Jackson has taken over. To me, those two guys, you can't get away from them. And then for the Chargers, obviously, this is a very tough. It's probably the hardest matchup in fantasy football is playing against the Ravens. Yeah, it's at home, so that helps a little bit. But This Ravens defense, to give up the fewest fantasy points to running backs and wide receivers, and they're in the top 3 against quarterbacks too. So with that said, you're playing Phillip Rivers, I think. He did have the 2 picks last week, but they came back big time in that game against the Chiefs. Finished with 313 passing yards with 2 touchdowns. So if he can give you a game with maybe 1 or 2 less picks, I think he's going to be great again. I think he's had an awesome season, and if you've been riding him for these past few weeks, I don't see a reason to get off of him. Yeah, it's a tough matchup, but you gotta play your studs in the tough matchups. And then at running back, apparently Melvin Gordon could have gone last week, but they wanted to hold him out knowing that they were going to have 9 days off in between. So they rolled with Justin Jackson because Austin Eckler missed the game as well. He gave you a pretty decent game, finished with about 90 yards and a touchdown with 20 touches. So if Melvin Gordon is out for whatever reason and Austin Eckler is out again, I think you can play Justin Jackson hesitantly. I think maybe only in a PPR league because, like I said, this defense is super tough. And then Keenan Allen, if he's healthy and he plays, he's another one of these studs that you kind of have to get out there. The threat of him catching 9 to 10 balls for 100-something yards and a touchdown is always there. So I would play him if he's healthy. If not, I think Tyrell Williams is the one to play between him and Mike Williams. I know Mike Williams had the better game last week with the 2 touchdowns and the 76 yards, but Tyrell Williams was targeted 12 times. He plays in the slot. That's definitely the weakest part of the pass defense for the Ravens. So if Keenan Allen is not playing, I think Tyrell Williams is a sneaky play. So if he's available on your waiver wire, and you're looking at those 2 wide receivers that we just mentioned in the last game, Crowder and Davis.
Yeah, seriously, they're much better options.
Yeah,
you got better quarterback throwing to him in
for
both
sure.
instances. Melvin Gordon is such an interesting conundrum to me because I'm looking at some news that he is expected to play. He's going against a good defense though, and again, he's like, you don't want to injure him again,
right?
So if this defense bangs him around, you're going to take him out of the game and just go with Justin Jackson.
Either that, or they only give him maybe 8 to 10 carries.
Right. You're going to ease him back into it. So, what do you do as a fantasy owner?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And it's the same thing with Keenan Allen. It's like he's injured. Apparently, it's a hip pointer. So
yeah, he did practice today, so that's a good sign. But again, I mean, obviously, the Chargers are gearing up for a playoff run. They're kind of this. Everyone's always really hype about them the weeks leading into the playoffs, and then they get in and do nothing.
I think if they had lost last week to the Chiefs and they didn't still have a chance to win the AFC West, I think if they were settling, if they knew they were going to be settling for a wild card, I think they'd say, yeah, you know what, Ravens, screw it. You guys can have the other wild card. We're going to sit these guys. But the fact that they won last week, and if they win, I think they would only really... I think they only need to win one more game in order for them to lock up the AFC West. To me, if that's the case, I think they're gonna play hard, man. And
that's the other thing too. They play Saturday night. The Chiefs don't play until Monday night.
Right.
So right there, I don't know who each of those teams have left to play because they are tied.
The Chiefs get the Raiders in Week 17.
Okay, so there's their divisional game.
Yeah.
Each of them, I guess, have one more divisional game.
Yeah, they play the Chiefs. They play the Seahawks this week, and then the Chiefs play the Raiders.
And the Chargers
17.
play.
I don't know who they have Week 17, but yeah, man, they're going
to.
Chargers
have the Broncos.
Yeah, so another division game. So I think they're going to be playing hard. And like I said, if Keenan Allen doesn't play, I think Tyrell Williams is a great play, especially in a PPR league.
What are your overall thoughts about Saturday football?
I love it.
Saturday NFL football.
I would take football all day long. I mean, every single day if I could.
Yeah.
Like if the schedule makers could figure out a way so that way we had maybe
football on every day.
You give teams off for Tuesday and Wednesday, and that's it. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're playing.
All right.
I think they could figure it out, man. The schedule makers have to deal with so many variables.
Seriously.
I think they'd be all for it.
That's funny. I do actually enjoy Saturday football. I'm one of those people that will say I hate Thursday night football, and I do. It's not my favorite. But something about Saturday football, Saturday NFL football, because yes, college football exists. We all know that. Saturday NFL football in December. It's nice. It's like, the holidays are coming up.
Yep.
You're usually at some like weird holiday party at your aunt's house that you don't feel like being at. But
and
you
there's
know
football
what?
on. Yeah, it's
all
great.
you do is find a TV. You sit down with your dip plate and you just enjoy some delicious food while watching whatever NFL game's on.
To me, it's like, so I'm a loser and I don't really do anything throughout the weekend during the football season. Like my weekend is just looking forward to Sunday at 1:00.
Yep.
So if I have more football on Saturday night, I'm a happy guy, man.
Only downside is it makes NFL Red Zone
a little weaker.
A little weaker. They have like 2 games going in the 4 o'clock hour, and it's just like Scott Hansen talking to you about touchdown dances, and it makes the 4 o'clock hour of Red Zone a little bit tougher, but that 1 o'clock hour is still strong as ever.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because this past week, so I nerd out on Sunday, and I put I have my 2 TVs, and I get a game up on each one of those, and then I have my projector, so I throw a third game up, and then I usually have the Red Zone on my other computer. And so this week I was like, I can break down the projector because I know we only have the 2 4 o'clock games, and then I'll just keep the Red Zone on the computer on the side. And then I realized there's only the 2 games, so there's no sense in having Red Zone on.
Just missing touchdown dances if you haven't seen them already.
Yeah.
All right, so who are we up to next? The Texans versus
the Eagles.
My
yep.
Eagles.
Yep.
Let's look at the Texans first. The game is in Philadelphia. I don't know the last time the Texans have played in Philadelphia. I remember
ever.
I don't know. They definitely have played here at some point there.
Well, they started in 2003, right?
Oh, that's true.
So it's been 15 years.
Wow.
You play teams in the other conference every 4 years. So they've only played each other now. This is going to be their 4th time playing each other, probably 4th or 5th. So yeah, they had to have played. They've had to have played in Philly at some point.
I mean, I remember one year that the Eagles started in Houston, and the first play of the game was a flea flicker thrown back to Donovan McNabb, and he went deep to Dante Stallworth for a touchdown.
No way.
It was amazing.
The first play of the game in Houston.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So the Houston Texans versus the Philadelphia Eagles lifetime. The Eagles are 4-0 in this series. Man, These are stats that I don't know if I want to be reading right now. They have played in Philadelphia. They played in Philadelphia in 2010, and they lost by 10 points, 24-34.
2010, so that was
the last time they were in Philadelphia.
Is that Michael Vick time?
Maybe. Mike Vick or Kevin Cobb. Who knows?
Yeah,
Mike Vick. Yep, that was Mike Vick.
Mike Vick 2.0.
LaShawn McCoy, touchdown. LaShawn McCoy, touchdown. Arian Foster, touchdown. Arian Foster, touchdown. Mike Vick, 2-yard run for a touchdown. Whoever Owen Schmidt was caught a touchdown pass from Mike Vick.
Tight end. I remember that
Jesus. Holy gosh. Okay, so overall, back to the future day. If I have
those Mike Vick days were fun.
Those
man.
were great.
Holy crap.
They were so great, so entertaining. I wish I was more into fantasy football in those days. Mike Vick was something else when he got going again.
Yeah, talk about Lamar Jackson and his rushing.
Yeah. Oh my God, no, Mike Vick. That was when he threw the ball too.
Right.
All right. The Houston Texans. If you have any of their wide receivers, they're in line for a nice afternoon. The Eagles are allowing the 2nd most points to wide receivers, and they have a knack for allowing a lot of yards but holding down points. So DeAndre Hopkins is absolutely going to have a big game. Is he going to have 3 touchdowns? Probably not. I would think if he has any, it might be 1, but he's going to have 10 catches and 120 yards to go with that.
Right.
So I like both. I like all their receivers really in this game. The Eagles still have guys named Crevan LeBlanc playing in their secondary, and Corey Graham, who's basically old as dirt and can only play run defense, but is out there playing as a safety for the Eagles too. The Eagles did stymie Jared Goff last week, but I actually think Deshaun Watson is better than Jared Goff. He adds that extra layer with his mobility that Jared Goff just doesn't have. He stands there like a statue, and I was calling him Jared Goof after the game last week. So I think I'm starting Deshaun Watson if he's on my team. I think I'm starting I know I'm starting any of the Texans receivers if they're on my team. On the Eagles side of the ball, I'm avoiding Eagles backfield. I think you saw last week equal production from Josh Adams and also Wendell Smallwood. Wendell Smallwood, to me, actually looked better in some of the runs.
Did.
Because he just hits the hole, where Josh Adams is still like trying to go east-west, but he's a big back, so he shouldn't be doing that. So Eagles are going to look at that and probably not give as many touches now to a Josh Adams kind of guy. So I'm all in on avoiding the Eagles' backfield.
Does Doug Peterson prefer that back that just hits the hole, or does he want a patient running back?
That's the thing, you can't ever tell, because Doug will say he doesn't control who's in the game, and that's Deuce Staley, the running back coach and assistant head coach. And I think Deuce prefers the running back who just sees the hole and hits it. And I mean, now you have Sproles back. You have Wendell Smallwood, who looked really good last week. Josh Adams, who you're trying to say is the number one guy. It's too much of a cluster, so I just can't trust any of them. And I would just avoid them for fantasy championships.
Real quick, last year we saw the Eagles, as what happens a lot with Super Bowl winning teams, we saw the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator get plucked away, go to different teams. We saw Frank Reich go to Indianapolis and John DeFilippo go to Minnesota. Do you think Deuce Staley is a guy that the Eagles might lose? I know he's been a coach there for a couple years. The Eagles have had a pretty decent running game over the past couple years, right? So
yeah, he's interesting. I don't think we would lose Deuce. Somebody I would expect to lose before Deuce Staley is Jim Schwartz.
Okay.
Kind of guy.
Right.
I think Deuce just blends into the woodwork too much. He's not a real flashy guy.
Especially because he's a career Eagle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
career Eagle. He's a running backs coach and assistant head coach, whatever that is. Like, what do you do as an assistant head coach?
Yeah.
You're not the offensive coordinator, okay, so you're also not the defensive coordinator. I don't know what an assistant head coach does aside from just walking around behind the head coach. So I think that was just like a nice promotion they gave Deuce. I think you would be more inclined to lose a Deuce Staley if, when Frank Reich leave, you saw Deuce get the OC job, which he didn't get.
Right.
So I think that says a lot. They like Deuce as a guy, as a character guy, leadership presence in the locker room, but I don't think he's a coaching candidate for anyone. I would bring back DeFilippo.
Right.
If I was the Eagles. But
The day that he got fired, my buddy at work, he's like, probably get him here around 3:00. He was all for it.
Seriously. Man. I don't know why. I don't know if there was some issue there, though, because obviously the Eagles lost their OC, and you would have thought if DeFilippo stayed, they would have just made him the OC. But instead he leaves to go get another OC job with the team you played in the NFC Championship game. So who knows? Maybe there's some weird bad blood there between him and Doug Peterson that no one knows about.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But that's just me speculating. The rest of the Eagles offense. Alshon out-targeted Zach Ertz last week. Texans are allowing the 9th most points to tight ends. So I'm still all in on Zach Ertz. I think he is going to have a bounce-back week. Nick Foles is spreading the ball around, but I think that potentially just helps Zach Ertz because now teams won't immediately key on him. Obviously, they'll have him in the back of their minds, but since Nick Foles is moving the ball everywhere, I think the Texans will have to respect that. Alshon is someone I'm going to play as well. I don't think the Texans have that great of a secondary on the back end. I think their defensive line has been really good, but the Eagles' offensive line has also picked it up, and obviously they just handled Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh last week, so they're kind of juiced up and had a good practice if you look at the Rams game that way for J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney and what they're going to be going up against with the Texans line. So I like Alshon. I like Ertz. I would potentially even consider Golden Tate this week. He had a couple looks last week from Foles. I think he's the type of receiver that when Foles checks it down, it usually is to that underneath the receiver type guy. So Golden Tate might be worth a look as a wide receiver 3 or even a flex option this week. And listen, if you are a 6th or an 8th seed, somehow made it to your championship game, and you have no idea who you're going to play a quarterback this week, let it ride. Go St. Nick, baby. If you're in need of a Christmas miracle, you might just get one with dear old St. Nick.
That's awesome. Do you think that Dallas Goedert's level of involvement is more than what Trey Burton's was last year? Does it seem to you, because it does to me, does it seem to you that Goddard's kind of hurt Ertz, at least in the past couple weeks, more than Trey Burton ever did last year?
Yeah, I think so. You always looked at Trey Burton as like an Eagles fan in the past as like this guy that apparently had all the talent in the world, but like never got on the field because he was this tight end 3. He would have like 3 catches a game, and they'd all be for like big flashy plays. But everyone talks about Trey Burton so much because he threw the Philly special. Right. Like that's really where Trey Burton like burst onto the scene.
Well, he did have. I remember there was 2 games last year where Ertz missed.
Yeah,
and
the Rams game was one of them. He had a good game against the Rams.
Yeah, that's what I remember Trey Burton as, and that's why, I was so excited to see that he was going to the Bears with Matt Nagy. I thought he was. To me,
I thought he would have had a way better year.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest. If I were to go back and look at all my, big hype things from the first couple episodes that we did. I think my biggest miss was Trey Burton and Alex Collins, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, no, I would agree with you. I think Dallas Goedert has given you more, but I think that's because for a large part of this season, the Eagles only had Ertz and Dallas Goedert because Richard Rodgers was their third tight end that they brought in to kind of replace the blocking that Brent Selleck gave them. Mm-hmm. And Rodgers started the year on the IR, I think, so he was hurt for most of it. So Dallas Goedert just immediately got on the field and started playing. And I think he has more talent or the potential for more talent than a Trey Burton does. I think Dallas Goedert is more of that Zach Ertz type, has a much higher ceiling. Obviously, both of those guys were taken in the second round. Generally looked at, I think, from the Dallas Goedert perspective as a first-round caliber tight end. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for those 2 tight ends, if they can replicate some of those former Patriots offenses where they just had those 2 dominant tight ends.
Right.
Hopefully we'll avoid the legal troubles
the
here,
murder and stuff like that,
yeah.
Moving on to the Giants and the Colts. I think it's pretty easy here for the Giants. You're really only playing Saquon. He did give you a dud last week, but like we were saying, he's your keeper going into next season over Todd Gurley for a reason. He's just an absolute monster. Definition of a every down back.
That's what kind of worries me about him for the rest of this year too, because the Giants are not going anywhere.
Right, and they're going to keep rolling him out there.
They're going to roll him out there, but then you saw it in the Redskins game. They blew the Redskins' doors off in the first half, and then they
shut him down.
They took him out of the game. So thankfully, he had gotten a lot of their points. So for fantasy owners, it was still a worthwhile endeavor. But Saquon, you're absolutely playing him. But if the Giants are up or getting blown out and he comes out of the game, I wouldn't say you shouldn't be surprised because they're trying to save him for the future of what he can be.
And to me, we have no idea what that offense is going to look like next year. The Giants.
Nick Foles could be the quarterback.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco could be the quarterback.
Right. Either one of them is very likely.
Yeah.
So, maybe even freaking Blake Bortles ends up over there. Who knows? But yeah, if they find themselves down in games, I think it's going to really hurt Saquon. Although he is very used in the pass game, so I think in PPR leagues he'll be fine. But for standard leagues out there, I don't know. I'd be worried about him. So to me, I'd go with Gurley. But hey,
if it's a blowout with Saquon for the rest of this season, really for next week, just hope it's a blowout in the Giants' favor and that a lot of the points have come to Saquon. Because if it's the other way, I can see the Giants just getting him out of the game because they're not going to risk injuring him in any way.
Yeah. They're what was he, the second overall pick?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It was Baker and Saquon.
Right. So Odell missed the second game in a row last week. He wasn't practicing today. I wouldn't be surprised if they shut him down. We've been seeing already today a couple players have been shut down for the rest of the season. And you would think, Sterling Shepard should be able to step up here. And that has not been the case in the 2 games this year without OBJ. These last 2 games, he's caught 4 of his 15 targets for 54 yards. One of those catches was for 38 yards, and one of them was for 14 yards. So do the math there. And he did have the touchdown against the Redskins, but still, he just hasn't been reliable enough, especially in this matchup here. The Colts actually, their strength is their pass defense, give up the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think the only other player you can possibly play here is Eric Ebron. It seems like he's the one who's going to benefit from having no Odell on the field. He got 12 targets last week, caught 8 of them for 75 yards. So I think this may be the sole week this season where you can actually feel confident that Evan Ingram should at least see the targets going into this game. And the matchup's not bad. It's not good. The Colts are right in the middle of the pack there against tight ends. As far as the Colts go, Andrew Luck, you're playing him. He's a stud. Marlon Mack, especially after this last game, you're playing him. The Giants give up the 8th most points to running back, so it's a good matchup for him as well. And then Ty, he's got that connection with Andrew Luck. He's one of the best receivers in the league, if you ask me. You're playing him, and same thing with Ebron. Yeah, he gave you 1 catch on 3 targets for 8 yards last week, but we've seen him numerous times this year go out and give you 20, 30 points with 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I feel like you can't really sit him, especially at a position that's as volatile as tight end. You'll take your lumps because the chance of him winning you a league, essentially. Those tight ends that can give you a 20-something point game instead of what everybody else is getting, which is probably somewhere between 7 and 11 points. Yeah. They can, like I said, they can just straight up win you games. So.
And Frank Reich has started to show you that he's a smart coach because, early in the year, they're throwing the ball all over the place with Andrew Luck, and like all good potential playoff teams do, as the year wears on, you got to start pounding the run and be able to run the ball. And
even if you play indoors.
Yeah, you got to do it everywhere.
Yep.
Running the football and defense is what wins in December in the playoffs, and the Colts are starting to put that together.
It is still football.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why
don't we move on to the Jaguars playing the Dolphins? This should be a pretty easy game.
Yeah, this is a putrid one. So Leonard Fournette, he's facing an 8+ man box every time he's on the field. That said, Miami's giving up the 5th most points to running backs, but I'm still worried. So I'm using Fournette, if he's on my team, as a flex or a running back 3, but doing so carefully and without any better options because he's their only weapon on the Jags offense right now. The Jags are a bad team. We talked about it earlier that we think they just quit on the season.
Cody Kessler is not a good weapon to you?
No, Cody Kessler is not. They're on the road too, so they have no home fans to worry about. They were on the road when they gave up that 99-yard touchdown, so the defense isn't showing up to this. So
it's Miami, bro. They're going to be out the night before having a good time.
That's another good point.
You know what I'm saying?
They got arrested. Some of the secondary got arrested in London when they played the Eagles over there. So who knows? Maybe we get another one of those stories where Barry Church and 5 other rookies are getting arrested in the morning hours just before the game starts.
What's the drive from Jacksonville to Miami?
I don't
maybe
know.
4 hours at most?
Too close.
Yeah.
Too close. So Jags are futile. Don't play them in your championship game unless it's Leonard Fournette and you have no other better options for a flex or running back 3.
How funny is it that the best professional sports team in Florida is one of their hockey teams? The Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Poor Florida. But, they do it to themselves. You got the Miami Marlins that are just a feeder system for these larger MLB teams.
Yep.
And then you have these NFL teams that just never can get it together. They just rely on these quarterbacks that they've drafted, convinced they're the guys. And
they think they just put a swimming pool somewhere in the stadium and people will come.
People will flock to it.
Yeah.
At least they get Marlins man at every Marlins game. But I think even he was pissed when they made some of the trades they made last year.
Yeah.
Enough about non-football related things.
Sorry.
Back to the Dolphins. We poured one out for Kenyon Drake. It might be his final pour out. He might be covered in too much beer to be of any fantasy value.
We might have drowned him in beer.
And they're not playing the Patriots. So again, he wasn't drafted to beat the Jaguars. He was just drafted to beat the Patriots, according to his coach.
Yeah.
So Kalen Ballage, if you need some help with the flex or a running back spot, go out and get him. And I would say go out and play him. They still have a good defense on Jacksonville, but we just talked about how they quit.
Yep.
And they've already given up a 99-yard touchdown run. You can't give up a longer touchdown run. So Kalen Ballage, I'm playing him. If I have Kenyon Drake, I'd probably flip a coin the day of, and depending on which way it went, play him because he still is, to me, one of the potential best options on the Miami Dolphins, but
in the past game, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, he still hasn't shown you enough. Danny Amendola is an interesting one, too. Since he's come back from his injury, he's looked good. I think he led the team in targets last week with 8, but the Jags are no stranger to his skill set. So if there's anyone on the team that they all want to cover and hit really hard, it might be Danny Amendola for what he did to them in the AFC Championship game last year. In this game, there's really no options unless you're in a big pinch, and then you can flip a coin on Fournette, flip a coin on Kenyon Drake. If you have no running backs and you're in the championship game somehow, go get Kalen Ballage. And Danny Amendola, I think, might just be the guy you're kicking yourself the week later looking at him on your bench. But no person with their right mind would have started Danny Amendola against guys you probably already have on your team.
Yeah, it's just so hard to judge whether or not this Jaguars defense is still a tough matchup or not. I mean, you look at them, they're still in the top 10 in fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. But, we just saw them get destroyed by Derrick Henry, and then the next week they're flat against the Redskins. It's just, how do you just can't really make a solid judgment there.
Yeah. And they're on the road, and I think that Miami point is a huge bit. So they have no home fans to play in front of. So if they did care about putting like a respectable product out there, they don't have to because it's not their home fans. And now they're in Miami, so it's the end of the season. They already don't care about football, and we can only imagine what that will lead to.
Yeah. Moving on to the Buccaneers and the Cowboys here. Both teams coming off of a loss. Cowboys are still obviously in the thick of this playoff contention. They have the 4th seed wrapped up right now. And so, in this matchup against the Bucs, who are in the top 10 as far as fantasy points allowed to all 4 positions, you can play Dak. You're going to play Zeke, obviously. And although he had a bad game, you're going to play Amari as well. And then on the side of the Buccaneers, Mike Evans is a must start, obviously. And then I think the other wide receiver to play is going to be Adam Humphries, Chris Godwin.
He should have been on our poor one outs.
Yeah.
He dodged a bullet.
Just like you see, 10 points here and then a 0.
Yep.
And then 9 points and then a 2.
Yeah. And
then a 3 and a 5 and maybe a 7 or an 8 there and then maybe a 0 again. He's just been ridiculously inconsistent. I think Peyton Barber is an interesting guy here. 20 carries last week, did catch 2 of his 2 targets, finished the game with about 90 total yards and a touchdown. But the Cowboys defense is pretty good, man. 5th fewest fantasy points, 2 running backs. And I just see the Bucs being down early, so I think they're going to have to, get away from Peyton Barber. So, Cam Brate, I don't know what the hell to do with him. In the one league that I was able to survive the Keenan Allen, Aaron Jones fiasco, I've been riding with Cameron Brate as my tight end. I started that year with Greg Olsen, and we all know how that whole situation went. So I've kind of been riding the waiver wire all season with tight end there, and I'm conflicted between him and Chris Herndon this week. So once we get to the Jets game, which is in part 2, maybe I'll have a better idea of what I'm going to do there.
Cameron Brate worries me because he's either going to get covered by Leighton Vander Esch, who is a defensive rookie of the year candidate, or
someone who
Jalen Smith.
I think the 2 of them after the season are going to push Sean Lee out of the Cowboys. I think
he's done.
I think we're going to see him get traded to somewhere because they have shown that those 2 linebackers are very good
all over the field.
Yeah,
and they just blow dudes up. I mean, hopefully the league goes back and looks at some of the tape of like the missed calls they've had of like helmet to helmet, just absolute massacres that Jalen Smith is doing to people.
Really?
The one I remember, and you can go back and look at this one because it's like super blatant. It's blatant in a couple of regards. First, Kamara catches the ball on like the sideline on like a 3rd and 18. They just do like a little screen pass to him. And Jalen Smith just runs over and absolutely drills him helmet to helmet, like essentially just launches, targets, spears him. Kamara hits the ground and like can't even stand up. But he's on the Saints sideline, so his players just like pick him up and like pull him over off the camera. It was 3rd down, so the Saints offense went off the field anyway. But the refs missed the targeting, and then whoever the concussion experts are, Alvin Kamara's in there 2 minutes later on offense playing the rest of the game when he obviously got a concussion when you go back and look at this hit. So those 2 linebackers that the Cowboys have are absolute monsters. If Sean Lee's still on the team next year, he's just going to be a rundown linebacker, and that's it, because Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith are for real monsters when it comes to linebackers.
I love how Van Der Esch has the little neck thing.
Yeah.
It's like you don't see that very much anymore.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I hate that he's a Cowboy.
Yeah, but he's
because I
good,
really
man.
wanted him as an Eagle.
Oh, yeah, really?
I mean, the Cowboys got him high, though. But yeah, he's pretty awesome. And I think anytime he makes a tackle or a play in a game, they play this like howling sound in the stadium, and everyone just like howls along with it. So yeah, he's pretty fun to watch.
We're going to move on here to what should be an awesome game here. Another game I'm super excited about. Chiefs at the Seahawks.
Yeah, this is a mini playoff game for Kansas City, really. They got to go on the road to a tough environment.
Playoff game for the Seahawks, too, really?
Yeah, both teams.
I mean, if they lose this game, they lose out, and one of the 7-17 wins, they're out of the playoffs.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to hold on to that wild card spot that they have. They're not going to they can't catch the Rams, but Seattle's a tough wild card team right now. So from the Kansas City side of the ball, I mean, you played Mahomes, you played Hill, you played Kelsey all year. You're not stopping that for the championship, no matter who you're going against. So all in on those guys. And then Damian Williams, I think, is the back I would play. I'm still going to keep an eye on Spencer Ware. I don't think he is expected to come back this week. Again, it was I think a lower body injury and a shoulder injury, which is a tough thing for a running back because both sides of your body are hurt. The part that you're trying to run someone over with, and then the thing that's doing the running in your legs. So Damian Williams, I think, showed the Chiefs a lot last week. And even if Spencer Ware was healthy, I think they would probably, and I think they probably still will, lean on Damian Williams as their back this week. On Seattle's side of the ball, Russell Wilson is going against the Chiefs defense, which is letting up a lot of points, which is good. So they're letting up the third most points to quarterbacks. So playing Russell Wilson, they're letting up the third most points to running backs. So with Rashad Penny out, I'm looking at Chris Carson this week. They also signed Bo Scarborough. So for those Alabama fans that remember Bo Scarborough putting up big numbers in a bowl game, I didn't realize where he ended up after the draft. He was drafted by Dallas, waived, signed by Jacksonville, cut, and the Seahawks just picked him up. So he might be active. I don't expect him to do anything, but Chris Carson or Mike Davis are two guys that I would probably look at. Again, unfortunately, as Seattle has shown us this year, kind of a coin flip with which one is going to be the focal point of the offense. And then of the receivers and the tight ends, Kansas City Chiefs are letting up the second most points to tight ends. So I'm either looking at a Doug Baldwin just as that possession, middle of the field guy, or a Nick Vannett, who, again, has not shown you much, but maybe you take a flyer on him if there's really no other tight end options out there for you in week 16.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if Chris Carson is healthy, he's the bell cow there.
Yeah.
But there's just been a few games this year where, he's missed, and then you don't know whether it's Mike Davis or you don't know if it's Rashad Penny. I think the first game that Chris Carson missed,
Mike Davis games, right?
I picked up Mike Davis, and the first time it was a Rashad Penny game, and I was really pissed. And then further along in the season, there was the one game where it was all Mike Davis. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, they run the football there for sure. That's what the Seahawks do,
and they're going to be doing it in this game because you got to keep Kansas City's offense off the field.
Sure, at home especially.
Yep.
The thing I want to look at real quick at this game, so the Chiefs allow the second most receiving yards, and they're tied with the Seahawks for the fourth most receptions allowed to running backs. So we did see Damian Williams last week. He caught 6 of his 6 targets. So in a PPR league, for sure, I think you can definitely feel good about playing him if you have to. And like you said, even if Spencer Ware is playing.
Right. I mean, he was making athletic catches last week. The one that he slides down on his knees by the first down marker and catches it. So, yeah, I think Damian Williams just athletically showed the Chiefs more last week than Spencer Ware has done for them. Spencer Ware obviously knows the playbook, knows the system, and is a guy they can rely on. But I think more flash and bang for your buck is a Damian Williams type guy.
Yeah, he seems a little more electric once he gets the ball.
Yep.
And then you're going to hear me mention that you at this point you would have heard me mention this in the DFS section, but Chris Carson last week, he caught 6 of his 6 targets. And that was the most that he had been targeted, or most catches he had all season. And same thing with Mike Davis. He had 8 targets and caught all 8 of them. So it really seems like last week the Seahawks playing against the 49ers, they wanted to throw the ball to these running backs. They targeted the position 14 times. So maybe that's something that they look at with this Chiefs defense, who has been allowing big receiving numbers to running backs all season. So it's one thing I'm looking for in that game.
It's gonna be a good Monday night game, though. So that's fun.
Can't wait. I'm gonna do the Broncos and Raiders here. It's just another quick game. Raiders defense is horrible. 7th most fantasy points to running backs, but they give up the fewest receptions to running backs. So, looking at Philip Lindsay, who, he doesn't get the line, he gets the lion's share of carries, but he doesn't get as many as somebody as talented of him should get. You always have Royce Freeman, like last week, snipping at him, taking 5 touches away from him. So I think Lindsay will get it done on the ground, but in a PPR league, I would temper my expectations, because for whatever reason, the Raiders are good at covering the linebackers, covering these running backs once they cross the line of scrimmage. But when they get the ball before the line of scrimmage, they can't stop you. So look for Philip Lindsay to have a good game in the rush. And then as far as the Broncos pass game goes, it was Deshaun Hamilton last week with 12 targets, 7 catches, 46 yards. So it's, he's obviously running these small, intermediate, underneath routes. But in a PPR league, you'll take that. 7 catches for 46 yards is an 11.5 point game. As a flex, that's not much more you can ask for.
Is he your number 1 flex guy this week?
Deshaun Hamilton?
Yeah, as a wide receiver. Like we talked about some other guys earlier, like a Jamison Crowder or Corey Davis.
I think, yeah. I mean, the Raiders, they're bad against a lot of things, quarterbacks and running backs, and especially the tight end. But for what if you're going to call it a strength, I guess it's the pass. But if this dude's going to get targeted 12 times again,
right?
If it's a PPR league, I would definitely play him. He killed me last week. He was one of the guys that I played against that played better than my 0.0 Keenan Allen for sure. Real quick,
there's no one there.
Yeah, real quick at the Raiders. You're probably not going to play Carr, and you're probably not going to play Doug Martin, and you're probably not going to play Jalen Richard. But the one player that you can play is obviously Jared Cook. The Broncos give up the 4th most fantasy points to tight end, so I think that's the one position player for the Raiders that you can feel confident trucking him out there for Week 16. So that's part 1. Me and Paul are going to run downstairs and grab some more beer, and then we're going to come up and do part 2. So stick around. All right, Adam. So here we are in Week 16 of the fantasy season, last week of the year. So let's win some of our listeners some money. What do you got for daily fantasy lineup? I know you like to go with the whole the Sunday main slate game. So run us through your lineup here for Week 16.
All right. So for the Week 16 Sunday main slot. I like some of these matchups this week, specifically on Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned quite literally before we turned this on, Saturday's matchups disgust me. So Sunday's matchups, on the other hand, I've got at quarterback, I think Dak versus those Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 7,300 is a good value quarterback. You look lower than him, and it really gets those terrifying names that you would pretty much never play. But I think Dak is going to have they're going to try and win. I mean, they're in a spot where they need to win because of what happened with the Eagles and everything being lined up, and that's a dream matchup to bounce back in. I'm also going to go with his cohort, Zeke Elliott, at running back for 8,800. Now, for me, it was between Zeke and going up a little bit for Christian McCaffrey because they're close enough, and
they both have awesome matchups.
Fantastic matchups. But you know what? With that in mind, I'm going to save the extra few hundred and hope Zeke gets close to McCaffrey's 100 yards, 100 receiving yards, and 10 catches. I'm gonna
and a passing touchdown.
Yeah,
Don't
can't forget that.
too.
I think this week he might even kick a field goal. So if that happens, Zeke, I really hope you maybe throw one at least.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually save some money and go with Jamal Williams. Now, obviously, the matchup in the run defense, and you have to defend the pass against even what has been considered a mediocre Aaron Rodgers, because a mediocre Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. And this is the premier back, so he's going to get the chance, Maybe he'll get a nice goal line touchdown. He did good once he came to the fruit came to bear last weekend. So I definitely like him at 5,800. And then I'm going to take a switch over here to receiver and go with my boy Robert Foster.
Okay.
Now,
rolling with the Foster.
Here's the thing with Foster, that Buffalo Bills team and going against New England. So Foster at 6 is intriguing, mainly because I think that matchup's been interesting this year. That offense has been wildly inconsistent, but recently Foster's been getting a lot of targets and converting that into points. So I think that with his value at 6,000 and arguably being a number one receiver that's getting the targets, I'll take the flyer. That's the type of play that wins you some big bucks.
Yeah, he's got 100 yards in 3 of the last 4 games.
It's been something absurd. I mean, no one on that offense has come even close to producing something like that the entire year.
It seems like their offense is just, have Allen drop back, and he looks to see if he's got a look to throw the ball deep, and then if he doesn't, he just takes off and runs.
Right, and that Patriots team, I mean, that does not look like the Patriots of
not at
years
all.
Past. And I think that this Buffalo team with a little young, brash confidence might want to come out and play, the upset special, if you will.
Week 16, why not?
Yeah, and up there in New England, normally, you go to away. I like when these young, cocky kids go away. Sometimes that's when they shine the best. So we'll see what happens. But I like that at 6. My next play here, so this is where I'm going to give you a hyphen. I'm either going to go DeAndre Hopkins for 8,900, playing my beloved Philadelphia Eagles, because God knows who's going to cover him. But, he did roll his ankle last week, and it's a little too early to know if he's 100% going to play or if he's going to be banged up or whatever that may be. And right behind him at 8,700, you have Antonio Brown playing those New Orleans Saints. That Saints defense has been better than credit's been given to him recently, I think. But I think you're going to see Antonio Brown come out, and Pittsburgh always gets better as it becomes playoff time. I hate it personally myself because I never seem to have a share of whomever it might be. But, I count on Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh, going to the Dome and seeing a Pro Bowler play like a Pro Bowler. And then, unfortunately, I have to say this next one, but I also have next Demaryius Thomas at 5,300.
So, I'm sorry. So if DeAndre Hopkins is playing, you're going to put in Hopkins. If he's not playing, you'll start.
Correct. Yep. Okay. So if DeAndre Hopkins is playing, I'm going to go Hopkins, because if anyone could pretty much come in and tell me who's going to cover him, probably wrong, and it won't matter anyways if you have the answer. Mm-hmm. No one. The answer is no one.
I mean, I think the Eagles can take all 3 of their fourth-string defensive backs and say, just triple team DeAndre Hopkins, and he's still going to go off and
at least a touchdown. Yeah. And the worst part is, it's not going to be a short touchdown.
That touchdown he caught, the second one against the Jets on Saturday, was ridiculous. And it wasn't a one-hander. It wasn't like a diving. It wasn't a, just straight outrun somebody. It was just he ran to the goal line, turned around, and the ball was right there, and he just snatched it out of the air. Like, his hands were so fast. It was ridiculous, dude. I love DeAndre Hopkins. He's
incredible. He really is. And unfortunately for the Eagles, that's their weak point. So, yeah, if D-Hop is playing, I'm going to go DeAndre. Okay. But if he's not 100% at all, then I'm going Antonio Brown, because I do think that really could be a strong game for him. And in that notion of the reason I'd be going D-Hop, I think Demaryius Thomas at 5,300 this week is that value is fantastic. I mean,
would you play both Hopkins and?
Yeah, because again, I mean, if you can't tell me who's going to cover Hopkins, you definitely can't tell me who's going to be on, Demaryius Thomas. And they've definitely been working him into the offense. He's had a good amount of target share. He hasn't really turned it into much. Unfortunately, again, this could be that week where he does.
And apparently Lamar Miller's banged up. We saw him leave the game early on Saturday, so if he's not playing, then you got to figure there's going to be some more work going towards those wide receivers.
Right.
So, yeah, it's probably maybe not a bad play playing both receivers at the same time.
And he's a bigger body, too, so I think that he's going to be a target if they get to, the pressure to Deshaun Watson. Mm-hmm. So, I like both of those receivers this week. At tight end, I think it's your boy. I like Ebron this week. Now, if you want to save money, Ebron's coming in at 6,100. He had a tough game last week.
He's just so inconsistent to me.
I know, but I think
especially now that his price has gone up towards the likes of Kelsey and Ertz and
but I think this week is the week that he's going to get himself a nice tutty, maybe two. And if you're not feeling confident in Ebron, let me give you one to feel even less confident about. But you can save $1,000 or so in Doku. David,
you've been on David Njoku all season, yeah.
Yeah, but what's funny about that? I've only started him once, and that was that game he actually dominated. But the inconsistency kills you with that. But he's got a nice matchup. So, hopefully he bounces back if you want to save some money. But I like Ebron. I think Ebron gets at least a touchdown this week.
Okay.
In that same vein, on that same team, my flex will be Marlon Mack.
Yep.
Another fantastic matchup. So my plan is that after Ebron gets 2 touchdowns, puts them up 14, they're just going to run the ball.
Then run, okay.
Right, so then the next 2 touchdowns go to Mack. And just to round out that, money-making day for everybody. I don't see how you can go past. I know they're expensive. I don't see how you go past Chicago's defense. 5,000, they're playing the Niners. I just don't. You could get risky if you want, but I think you go with the stalwart.
I don't know. I really like that 49ers offense. I think we're going to see one of those quarterbacks and one of those running backs be traded at some point in the offseason because they just seem to have a absolute stockpile of talent at almost every position. We're seeing the backups just killing it for them at every position on offense. Even at tight end, we saw Brent Selleck, or not Brent Selleck, his younger brother, Garrett Selleck, go out there and catch a touchdown.
Fun fact for you about TJ Beathard real quick.
Okay.
Prior to it becoming illegal, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I came back, but I used to go with him when he was leading the Iowa, I don't even remember what Iowa's.
The Hawkeyes?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
I used to go with CJ Beathard as my quarterback in FanDuel, college football, when he was leading that Hawkeyes offense. They had 2 really good running backs.
Okay, cool.
But not Sunday.
So for my lineup, I have a couple of the same players, couple of running backs, and I'm kind of following your lead a little bit with that Pittsburgh Saints game, but I'll start at quarterback. I'm going with Trubisky for 7,900. Also, real quick, my lineup, I like to try and spread the entire week. So from the Thursday games to the Monday games, I feel like the more players available, the more you can change around your lineup, and the more variables there are in that matchup there. So mine's going unfortunately this week in FanDuel, though they don't obviously have a Thursday game, and they're not including the 2 Saturday games in the full week slate. So this is really only Sunday and Monday. So as I said, quarterback Trubisky for 7,900 at the 49ers. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and I think the Bears are going to be out there trying to get that win, trying to secure a first-round bye. It's pretty much them, the Rams, and the Saints all fighting for those top 2 spots, and all 3 of these teams are rolling. Maybe except for the Rams, they really looked great over the past couple weeks. But so I like the Bears. I like Trubisky. Running back, my top running back is Marlon Mack. I agree. The Giants, 8th most fantasy points to running backs. And we just saw when the Colts got some help back at offensive line. I think they got one of their guards back this past week. Seems like they really tried to focus on running the ball again. We saw Marlon Mack have, 25-something carries. Andrew Luck wasn't throwing the ball 50 times like he usually does. So, maybe they're trying to get back to that right before the, as the season winds down here before the playoffs start. My next running back, talk about grinding it out in the run game. Chris Carson for $6,400 against Kansas City. The Chiefs give up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs, the 2nd most receiving yards, and they're tied for the 2nd most receptions to running backs. And we saw last week Chris Carson get 6 targets. That was the most targets he got all season. Maybe it seemed like the Seahawks were kind of bring that a little bit of that element into their offense last week, and it's definitely something that they can attack this Kansas City defense with. Obviously, anytime you're playing the Chiefs, a running back, you can very, very quickly be kind of cast out of the
you get worried
game
about
script.
the shootout potential.
But I mean, this is the Seahawks, and they run the ball more than anybody in the league. I don't think they're going to get away from him. He's been a beast. He's been their bell cow all season. So I like him for 6,400. At wide receiver, I'm going with Devontae Adams for 8,500 against the Jets. My Jets cannot cover wide receivers. They're bad at it and give up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. And we've seen what seems like for the first time, and I don't know, since Aaron Rodgers has been there, there's really only one wide receiver you have to worry about on the Packers. These other guys are not getting it done. MVS, St. Brown,
Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, your boy Jimmy Graham. And then, like you were saying with the Steelers-Saints game, I think that's going to be a shootout. And I mean, if you look at it over the past couple weeks, and I'm pretty sure, really, if you look at it over the entire season, Juju is the better wide receiver in Pittsburgh, at least fantasy speaking. $8,000 for this dude who gets over 10 targets a game almost every game. It definitely helps him having Antonio Brown on the other side. And to me, I think they produce the same amount, and Juju's worth less every week. So the Saints are giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. Like I said, it should be a shootout. So to me, it's an easy grab is one of those wide receivers for the Steelers. Figure out a way to get one of them in your lineup.
I'm just waiting for that game though where Antonio comes back. You've been waiting for it all year.
It'll come. It'll be here eventually. It's been a couple weeks now.
I mean, to be fair though, if you were Ben, you would like throwing to Juju too. He's way bigger.
Yeah, and I mean those tight ends are not bad, and they used their running backs in the past game. I mean that offense is great. We all know that. My flyer of the week, my cheap guy that I'm hoping to cash me in for 100 yards and a touchdown, is Robbie Anderson for $5,900 facing the Packers. If the Packers come in and do what I think they're going to do and get up early on the Jets, the Jets are going to have to throw the ball. The Packers are giving up the fifth most fantasy points to wide receivers, so it's not a bad matchup. He's got 25 targets over the last 3 weeks. Sam Darnold seems to have developed something with Anderson. He's throwing the ball a little more down the field. Beginning of the season, he wasn't doing that at all, and that's why it kind of looked like Robbie Anderson was going to have a wasted season. But he's definitely picked it up over these past couple weeks. I listened to a lot of the New York sports talk radio, being a Mets and a Jets fan. And there's an interview with one of the guys on the fan, and he was talking about how, in these last couple of weeks of the season, he really just wants to, let the ball go and just and try and develop that deep chemistry with Robbie Anderson. So I'm looking for a shot in the dark there with Robbie Anderson and my New York Jets. At tight end, I'm going Austin Hooper for $5,300 against the Panthers. They've been one of the worst teams against tight ends all season. They give up the third most fantasy points to the position. Last week he dropped a touchdown that would have given him a nice game, and the week before that he played really good against Baltimore. He actually dropped them. Throughout almost the entire season, the Ravens were in like the top 5 as far as fewest fantasy points allowed to tight ends, and now they're in the middle of the pack all because of what Austin Hooper did to him a couple weeks ago. So I like him for cheap with a great matchup. And then, like you were saying, Jamal Williams, with Aaron Jones now on IR, $5,800 for a starting running back.
It's just tough to beat that.
Yeah, with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, again, the matchup's not bad at all. And volume is key, especially as we've gotten into the end of the season here. It's cold. These games are outside, a lot of them. Up here in the Northeast, it's cold, man. So you got to run the ball, and I like these running backs late in the season. And then for my defense, I'm going with the Vikings. I'm saving a little bit of money, getting away from the Bears. The Vikings at the Lions. Matthew Stafford has been nothing like he had been in the past all season. We've seen the Lions just lose talent every couple weeks throughout the season, between the trade of Tate and Marvin Jones going down and Kerryon Johnson being in and out of the lineup. They kind of have a revolving door at running back right now.
The bright spot has been LeGarrett's one game.
Yeah, LeGarrette Blount having the big game on Thanksgiving, but we're seeing them bouncing around between Zenner and Theo Riddick and LeGarrette Blount, and
it's a mess.
And Kenny Galladay's been so inconsistent. Although he had a really nice game last week, but they've just been so inconsistent. And I like the Vikings. I like that defense a lot. They really turned it around in the second half of the season here. So that's my daily fantasy lineup for Week 16. We are back here with part 2 of Week 16 Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm going to start us off here with the Bengals coming off of a win against the Raiders. It cost me like $200-something bucks. Thanks a lot. And the Brownies coming off of a win against the Broncos. And I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I think the Browns are going to win 2 straight, man. Apparently, Tyler Boyd is most likely to miss this game. He didn't practice today. He might be a candidate for one of these Week 16 early shutdowns. And, even if he does play, I don't really like this offense very much. It's pretty much just Joe Mixon, and that's it.
He didn't practice today either.
Joe Mixon didn't practice. Wow.
Apparently dealing with a wrist injury, I think I saw.
Wow. Yeah, he did touch the ball 29 times last week, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked fantastic. So if he doesn't play, you're going to see Giovanni Bernard step into what will be a huge workload, considering what the Cincinnati pass game looks like right now with Jeff Driscoll leading them. Last week threw the ball, completed 14 passes for 130 yards, touchdown and interception, but he did rush for 32 yards. He did look pretty good on his couple scrambles, so maybe that's something that they try and replicate after seeing what Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson's doing around the league as far as quarterbacks rushing the ball. For the Browns, Baker Mayfield, he's actually he's starting for me in the lone championship game that I'm in. I decided I'm going to pick him up and play him over Kirk Cousins. I also had Lamar Jackson in that league, but I'm afraid of that matchup against the Chargers. So I'm going to roll with Baker Mayfield, man. Last week, he only had 188 yards passing. He did have 2 touchdowns. He's looked a lot better over these past couple of weeks. I think I saw some stats where, he was in the top 5 for highest completion percentage and most yards over that course of those games. So, like I said, I'm rolling with him. I think you should too if he's on the waiver wire and you're struggling at quarterback. The other guy is obviously Nick Chubb. Last week, an even 20 carries for an even 100 yards. Makes his rush average real nice. And the 3 weeks before that, he caught 10 of his 12 targets, averaged 34 receiving yards a game. And you look at the Bengals, they're giving up the most fantasy points to running backs. They're also giving up the 6th most receiving yards to running backs. So I think Nick Chubb is going to get it done for you both in the run game and in the pass game. You'd think with a defense that is susceptible to pass catching running backs, you think Duke Johnson might be the play, but I don't know, man. He was only targeted 2 times in the last game against the Bengals. He was targeted 5 times last week against the Broncos, but it's just he's not giving you the yardage that he was last season on those minimal touches that he gets a game.
And for a guy that, sure, he's starting to come on, but hasn't yet at all this season, Week 16 is not the week I'm expecting him to show up for me. Baker, I actually like as a start because, you saw it after they played the Bengals right after Hugh Jackson left and went back to the Bengals. Baker hates the Bengals now. Yeah. So it's like a game that I think he gets extra up for.
If not the Bengals, he definitely just hates Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, completely. So it could be an interesting day for Baker.
For sure.
Hopefully he wakes up feeling dangerous.
Yeah. That'd be fun. So that does it for Bengals Browns. We are going to move on to the next game here. We got what should be another awesome game.
This is
Steelers at the Saints.
I'm probably most excited to watch this game this weekend. It's on. It's one of the 4:00 games this weekend. I don't know if it's going to be on Fox or it's a 4:25 game. So I guess it is on Fox. I think that's the game of the week. Because I also would have been fine if it was the Jim Nantz, Tony Romo game. This could have went either way for me. But this is going to be a fun game. Steelers first. Antonio Brown, Juju, Big Ben. Saints allow the most points to wide receivers and the 5th most quarterbacks. So look for the Steelers' aerial attack to be on full display in what should be a pretty strong offensive game, I would think. Steelers are likely going to be without James Conner. He told reporters this week that he's still not going to be ready for the game this weekend. So Jalen Samuels, if you decide to roll with him, I wouldn't touch Stephen Ridley. But the Saints are allowing the 4th fewest points to running backs. So I'm probably not touching any of the Steelers running backs unless James Conner somehow makes this miraculous return and tells everyone he's 100% ready to go. But that's not likely the case. So if James Conner is how you got here, unfortunately, you're going to have to do it without him because he's probably not playing. And even if he does, it's not a great matchup because they're not going to give him a full workload if he does get in the game. And the Saints have a really good run defense. So,
see, I disagree. Actually, I'm willing to start Jalen Samuels if I know James Conner is not going to be in. I know the Saints are very good against the running backs, but this is a different kind of offense when you got those two beasts outside. With Antonio Brown and Juju, and I think they like the Steelers do. I think they like Jalen Samuels in the pass game as well. So I can see him still being used in the pass game. I mean, he did have 20 touches last week.
Right. Sure.
It's hard to get away from volume, right?
I don't know if in your leagues Jalen Samuels gets listed as the tight end.
Yeah. What leagues is this that you see that?
I don't know.
NFL.
I've seen it in some Yahoo leagues.
Okay.
I have not seen it in my ESPN league because I had him in that and he was only a running back. But, I mean, if you could list him as a tight end, sure, go ahead and use him because that's awesome because tight end is so limited. Yeah,
he's not a tight end in ESPN, CBS, or in my Yahoo league. He's not.
Yeah. Okay.
So it must be NFL Network.
They might have adjusted this too.
Yeah.
Because, before James Conner gets hurt, he's this guy buried on a depth chart that is on no one's team, and now he gets used. And, I think...
And we did see
it would be smart for leagues to start to correct positions if they're giving this guy 2 positions and he's only playing 1.
We saw it last year with Montgomery, who was on the Packers at the time when he went from a running back to a running back / wide receiver to a wide receiver over the course of like 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. It happens. I haven't seen it in any of the leagues that I'm in. I haven't seen him as a tight end, but I've heard that, which is, if you can start a running back that's going to get 20 touches as a tight end.
Go ahead and do it.
It's a cheat code.
All right, on the Saints side of the ball, big players have to show up in big games. So Breeze, Kamara, Michael Thomas, none of them really have great matchups per se across the board, but they're at home. They're playing for a first-round bye, nationally televised game. Those guys, I'm playing them regardless of the matchup because that's what time of year it is. It's championship time. These are the guys that got you here.
Right.
These are the guys that are still healthy and playing, so you're using them.
I think there's plenty of people going into the season that maybe saw this game and said that could be a Super Bowl preview.
Yeah.
Not knowing that Patrick Mahomes was going to throw 50,000 touchdowns. But, we saw the Saints over the past couple weeks kind of trying to figure out who they can count on as a wide receiver too, and it's been a merry-go-round, and I don't think they found anybody. I think they're just going to go, all right, screw it. Let's go back to the formula of, 12 to 15 touches, or as far as carries go, to Kamara and Ingram. Throw the ball to those guys as well, and then really just feed Michael Thomas because he showed that with the targets he can produce. So hopefully the Saints go back to that.
Yeah, and the one other player on the Saints that might be an interesting person to take a peek at is Big Ben Watson. The Steelers are letting up the
5th most points
points to tight ends. I'm just trying to give you a numbers check on how many targets he saw last week. He only had 2 targets last week. So,
and that was against the Panthers, who have been one of the worst teams against tight ends all season. Yeah, I was looking at that too, and I was thinking, yeah, maybe, but it's just, I don't know. They just don't seem to. They don't use the tight end there.
Yeah, once they got rid of Jimmy Graham, the tight end position in New Orleans essentially just evaporated. Because I remember going after, I can't remember who they replaced Jimmy Graham with the first year, but I'm like, oh yeah, this dude is going to be the steal of the draft whenever that year was, a while ago now. But tight end position has not really materialized in New Orleans after Jimmy Graham departed. But again, if you can't play Jalen Samuels as your tight end and there's no one else, and Big Ben and Ben Watson is on your roster, then go ahead and use a Ben Watson.
Yeah, the matchup's there. So it's like really the only thing you can look at as far as tight ends. Because, I mean, if you're just looking at target share and catch ratio and, yards per game, there's really only going to be a very small handful of those top tier guys that are consistent, and everybody else is going to pretty much look exactly the same. Moving on to the Falcons and the Panthers. We were just talking about it, the tight end position for the Falcons. I can see playing Austin Hooper here. Some leagues he might be available on the waiver wire. So like you were saying, if you're in a situation where you need a tight end, the Panthers have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. It's not the worst matchup in the world there. And Austin Hooper, we did see him play very well against the Ravens a couple weeks ago. But I mean, as far as the Falcons go, it's the big guns of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. We did see, as I mentioned earlier, Coleman had a really nice game, and with Ito Smith out, Coleman should get all of those touches, should see, somewhere around 15 to 20 touches in total, I would assume. The Panthers' one strength on their defense is against the run, however, so I don't know if I can really say I'm going to look for another 100-plus yard game from Coleman, but, I mean, with volume, you can't really get away from these running backs, especially in a running back that's in a really good offense like this Falcons offense is. Apparently Julio's got something going on. I think it's like a fractured rib or something. So he's missed practice all week, and there's rumblings he might miss the game, but I highly doubt it. I think Julio's going out there no matter what. And then Calvin Ridley, he's just the ultimate coin flip, the ultimate wild card. Panthers give up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so it's not a bad matchup for him, but it's just been so inconsistent that I would stay away from him if I could. Moving on to the Panthers, man, we got news that Cam Newton got shut down. The NFL Network reported that he's going to miss the rest of the season, so therefore Taylor Heinicke is going to come in and start. To me, therefore, there is no sense in starting anyone on this Panthers team except for Christian McCaffrey. Kind of a shame, we saw DJ Moore have a couple games in a row where he played really well, and we saw some consistency out of Curtis Samuel where he had 4 or 5 games in a row with between 8 and 10 points. And then there was some flashes from Ian Thomas, made it seem like they actually have a good tight end waiting for the departure of Greg Olsen. But this past game, 2 catches on 4 targets for 14 yards. Against the Falcons, who have a horrible defense themselves, the one position that they're not bad at actually is defending against the tight end. So I'm staying away from anybody except for Christian McCaffrey, who we saw last week get it done with 15 carries. He caught 8 of his 11 targets. That's right, 11 targets for a running back. And then he also threw a touchdown. So they literally use him every way they can. I would not be surprised if they said, "Hey, Christian, you want to go return punts?" Just because you're the best at everything. So
yeah, he's just going to do everything this week, or not do anything because he's going to be facing 12 men in the box. Because
right.
I don't even know who the quarterback is anymore, and you just said it.
That would be Taylor Heinicke.
Taylor Heinicke.
If we're saying it right.
Mr. Heinicke, good luck to you, sir.
Yeah, good luck, bud. So yeah, that does it for the Falcons Panthers. What do you got for the Bills playing at the Patriots?
Well, I would not want to be the Bills. Patriots coming off a loss They're now the 3rd seed in the AFC
Coming off
playoffs.
of 2 straight losses.
Oh, 2 straight losses. That's correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't want to be the Bills in this matchup. Patriots are at risk of losing that first round bye. I can't imagine the Patriots playing on wild card weekend.
Yeah.
It's almost unthinkable. But that said, for anyone considering a Buffalo Bill to play, Patriots are letting up the 10th most points to opposing quarterbacks. So I know one of the guys that's in my one of the guys that's in the championship game in my league, in my standard league, is playing Josh Allen. He played him last week, and he's, as of right now, playing him again this week. So if you're really looking for a matchup play at quarterback, Josh Allen is potentially a better matchup play than Tom Brady is. Tom Brady's going up against the toughest defense for opposing fantasy quarterbacks. Bills are letting up the fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. So, I mean, I don't know how you don't trust Tom Brady at home against the Bills in December with the playoffs on the line. But if you're just a analytics guy or gal and you want to play the matchups, then Josh Allen would be your matchup play here.
Yeah.
On the Patriots side, otherwise, James White and Sony Michel are facing an average run defense, so I would rely on those guys if you've been relying on them so far this year. And then Rob Gronkowski, he hasn't done much, but if you are a Gronk owner and you're looking for an excuse to play him this week and continue to try and rely on him, in Gronk's career, he only has double-digit touchdowns against one team, and that one team is the Buffalo Bills. So he has 12 career touchdowns against the Bills. If you're looking for an excuse to play him, maybe that's your excuse.
It's the one sole thing you can look at for some hope.
Right. Because unfortunately, Gronk is one of those guys that's, I think, let us all down this year in terms of tight end ability. But
he's got to be one of the biggest busts of the year for
seriously.
Sure.
You have anything else on anyone in that game? I mean, the Bills are saying LaShawn McCoy is hurt. He might not play.
Yep. Apparently, Marcus Murphy also will most likely miss this game, so we're looking at
whatever that guy does.
Yeah, he's a running back.
Okay.
He got 11 carries last week. And so it seems like the only running back that is going to be able to play for them is
he's also their quarterback, Josh Allen.
No, this dude named something Ford, something with a K. I didn't write down his whole name. I just wrote K Ford, thinking that I'd remember, but
we'll call
I
him
don't.
Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin Ford, maybe. He did have 15 touches last week for about 50 yards. So
I'm definitely not playing.
Yeah,
K
definitely
Ford.
not playing K Ford for sure. We saw Rex Burkhead last week had 7 touches, and James White's production went down, and Sonny Michel's production also went down. So, yeah, to me, the only running back I can play on the Patriots right now is Sonny Michel. Until Rex Burkhead either blows out another knee or just fumbles twice, because that's really the only thing that's going to re-clear up this backfield in New England.
What would you do if your only 2 quarterback options were Josh Allen or Tom Brady? Who are you playing?
Honestly, I think I would go with Josh Allen, man.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's the Patriots, so they're going to do everything they can to stop him from running. Mm-hmm. They're going to I bet you they just rush 5 all game, and they tell the 2 defensive ends,
just contain.
If you let him outside the pocket, you're cut.
Yeah.
That's your the defensive line's only job is to keep him in the pocket.
That's a good
and
point.
Just let him throw the ball to Zane Jones and what's his name, Robert Foster down the field. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, they throw the ball down the field. This dude has a cannon.
Oh yeah.
So it seems like their play call is if they're not running the ball, it's okay. Josh Allen, drop back, look at your first read. If he doesn't have a step on somebody, then just run the ball, and if he does, then bomb it, and maybe we'll get an easy 60, 70 yards.
Yep.
And it's been working. So I honestly think I would go with Josh Allen, dude.
Yeah.
The defense looks good.
From game flow, we're going to assume the Patriots are up in this game, and they're throwing the ball, and we're throwing the ball a lot. So Josh Allen is either running when he's scrambling, or he's throwing the ball and accumulating yards.
Yeah.
Which are points.
He might throw another pick, but he also might run for 100-something yards with a touchdown, and he also might have another 200 yards passing and a touchdown. I mean, you look at it's been a really nice comparison between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson over these past couple of weeks because they're very similar in that they both run around so much. Josh Allen is a better passer than Lamar Jackson is, I think. I mean, he's at least putting up better stats.
Yeah.
So he's a better fantasy player. Whether he's a better quarterback, we'll have to wait and see. It's kind of funny that, we've seen all the 5 quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round last year. Me as a Jet fan, I hope I'm not sounding biased, but I think the worst of the 5 is clearly Josh Rosen.
Oh, absolutely.
Like he had a Hall of Fame receiver and a Pro Bowl running back to work with. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe the rest of the receiving core there wasn't very much. Maybe the offensive line wasn't great, but
I think you blame the head coach a little bit too. I mean, like the whole organization down there, like they weren't set up to get a rookie quarterback and be able to groom him. And
no,
Josh Rosen seems like a guy that needs a lot of grooming.
Yeah. Yeah, after
that's how you put it nicely to say he sucks.
You're very nice over there, Paul. Moving on to my Jets playing at the Packers, right? Is it at the Packers? Or no, is it in New York?
Ooh,
do you check that for me there? Because I actually I have a friend at work who's very into sports gambling, and he was talking about how he thought he saw somewhere the line shifted to the side of the Jets, that the Jets were favored.
This game is in New York.
Okay, so that would make kind of sense if they're assuming Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, but apparently he
expected to play.
Yeah, he was talking to reporters today at his locker room. He said, "I'm playing." He was talking about how you can't really be a leader if you're shutting it down. But I don't know. To me,
no one on that team has the authority to shut him down either. Mike McCarthy, Joe Philbin's not shutting Aaron Rodgers down.
I was thinking to myself earlier, I was like, he's one of maybe 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league where it's his choice whether he's going to play or not. It's like Big Ben, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. I think Russell Wilson's there now.
Phillip Rivers.
Yeah. Like just those dudes, if they say they want to play, they're going to play.
These old gunslingers that aren't listening to anyone but them.
So I'm looking at the Packers. If Rodgers plays, I'm playing him. He hasn't been Aaron Rodgers this season at all. I think the last time I looked, he's like the number 12 quarterback in fantasy football. I've said it many times. I drafted him in the 4th round of my 0 RB league that I went this season, and like I said last week, I started Lamar Jackson over him because Lamar Jackson's been more consistent. Last week, Rodgers had no touchdowns and a pick on 274 passing yards. They did not look great. As I mentioned, Aaron Jones left the game early with the knee injury. He's on IR, so it's the Jamal Williams show. Last week had 16 touches for just about 100 yards and a touchdown. We saw in the first 2 weeks when Aaron Jones was suspended, Jamal Williams was getting the majority of touches, and I think he had one good game, one bad game. So you're kind of just rolling with him. If you've been counting on Aaron Jones, if you don't have a good backup running back on your bench there, and I think you can roll with Jamal Williams. This Jets running game, their defense against running backs isn't bad, but it's not great. They're right in the middle. And then obviously Devontae Adams you're playing. He's a beast. 8 catches on 13 targets. Every week he's leading the team in targets. 120 yards last week. So he's definitely the play at wide receiver. And then looking at the Jets, Sam Darnold looked really good last week, man. He came back, threw the ball, completed 24 passes for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, also ran the ball for 35 yards. So he showed that he's, still got that element, even though he's kind of got a bum ankle.
Where's he in your rookie quarterback list?
I would say he's probably, I'd say Baker's one.
Yeah, I agree.
I would probably say going forward, Josh Allen too, unfortunately. And then Lamar Jackson 3. I really like Lamar Jackson.
Really? Okay.
And then Sam Darnold. But I mean, we haven't seen a full season out of Sam. We haven't seen a full season out of Lamar either.
Yep.
We haven't really seen a full season out of Josh Allen, really, because he missed a couple games as well. So,
I would put it at Baker is 1, Rosen is 0,
-4.
Yeah, he's last, and then those other 3 guys that have all been injured at some point this year are in some mix in the middle. But I think I would put it as Darnold, Allen are almost like that second spot to me, neck and neck tied. And I'm not as big on Lamar Jackson yet. Every time I see him throw the ball, it looks like if you're playing Madden, you just tap the button that you want it to throw to. It's like all these weird lob passes, and it looks like he's just, I don't know. I think the game speed is going to catch up to him pretty quick.
I think they spent this past offseason building an offense for Joe Flacco. Mm-hmm. I think they need to spend an offseason building an offense for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
They need a completely different group of wide receivers. Like Willie Snead,
it's a whole new style. You got to get rid of Harbaugh. You got to get rid of Marty Morningweg. Like, you got this fancy sports car sitting in your driveway, and you got these 2 old dudes that are like old school football guys. They're like,
I gotta clean my car.
What do we do with this? Give me my old beater, my Joe Flacco beater.
I want my '76 Camaro back.
Yeah, jeez. So
you got a Tesla sitting there, bro.
But no, I would say Sam Darnold is my my number 2 rookie quarterback of this year.
I just feel like he's been the most inconsistent of all of them. Like, Lamar's shown you that he's going to give you 150 pass yards and maybe a passing touchdown, and he's going to give you between 75 and 100 rush yards and maybe a rushing touchdown. Mm-hmm. Now, if they can work on his passing and bring that up to 200, maybe 220 pass yards, I think they have a group of tight ends that are really going to be awesome next year with him. So I think that's one thing to maybe look for next season is, because of what this tight end position is, just get one of those Ravens tight ends, ride them for the first couple weeks until the waiver wire kind of figures it out, and then ride with the waiver wire tight end, because there's no sense in drafting anybody except, in my opinion, except for those top 4, which is Kittle, Ertz, Kelsey, Gronk. Mm-hmm. And maybe Ebron gets back in there too, and maybe Jack Doyle, blah blah blah. But another guy that maybe could find himself in the group of maybe top 10 tight ends drafted is Chris Herndon with the Jets.
It's an excellent segue by you.
Thank you. He's been, he hasn't been great, but he hasn't been bad. You're going to get a good 4 or 5 points from him every week. This Packers defense gives up the 6th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. However, it's pretty much right now it's Chris Herndon and Robbie Anderson, and then it's a little bit of Elijah McGuire running the ball. So it seems like it's going to be the same formula going into this game. I mentioned in my DFS lineup, actually, I'm playing Robbie Anderson as my dart throw because it just seems like over the past couple weeks they've kind of developed something. The Jets started the season out kind of keeping Darnold from throwing the ball down the field. It seems like they didn't really want him to take those deep shots, but now he's like, screw it, I'm going to throw the ball, so I'm going to let it go. It's, week 15, week 16, see what happens. So I think you can play Robbie Anderson. The Packers give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So that does it for me in the Jets and the Packers game. What do you got, Paul, for the Vikings playing a NFC North showdown in Detroit against the Lions?
Yeah, this is a big game for the Vikings because they're fighting for their playoff lives. They currently have the last wildcard spot in the NFC, so they really have to go out there and keep winning games. So,
especially with a tie at the end of their, that
it ruins them.
Yeah,
this is where the ties come back and hurt you.
Right.
So looking at the Vikings, they're facing pretty much a below average defense across the board with respect to quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. The Lions are pretty good against tight ends, and the Vikings really haven't used their tight ends at all this year. So just focusing on the quarterback and the wide receivers and the running back, I think I'm all in on Dalvin Cook. They really put a focus on running the ball. That's what they kept complaining about with John D. Filippo there, that they weren't running the ball enough. And you saw last week Dalvin Cook get a lot more touches, a lot more productivity, and they put up one of the highest point totals they put up all season against the Dolphins. After Dalvin Cook, Diggs, Thielen, you're playing both of those guys as wide receiver 1s or 2s, and then Kirk Cousins is an interesting one to me. I think if you have him on your team, the last time he played the Lions, he didn't really set the world on fire. He was 18 for 22 with 164 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. This is where I worry about Kirk Cousins. He, to me, is not a big-time player. You see that he has the worst record in Monday Night Football of like anyone. So I don't think that's just primetime games. I think that's just like the primetime nature of pressure. He hasn't been a guy to me that can get it done in the big spot. So I worry about Kirk Cousins this week as a guy that they might win the game, but I could see his line being very pedestrian like it was the last time they played the Vikings, or the last time they played the Lions when they were at home. They won 24-9, but Kirk Cousins only gave you 164 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So
that's what I looked at when I was sitting there figuring out whether I wanted to put a claim in for Baker Mayfield to start at quarterback, and I said, yeah, man, I like where Baker's trending compared to where Cousins is trending, especially considering they ran the ball 35 times last week.
Yeah.
So I think they're gonna, do that again. They're gonna try and rely on these two running backs for the Vikings to try and nail them home.
The first matchup against the Lions, Dalvin Cook had 10 carries, Latavius Murray had 10 carries. Dalvin Cook averaged 8.9 yards a carry. So with those numbers, I could see him getting the ball at least 20 times. And then, if Latavius Murray gets it another 15 to 20, that would be more what I expect.
They got 3 touchdowns from the 2 running backs last week. I can see the head coach going, see, I told you we should have been running the ball all season.
Yeah. They're going to do a lot more of that.
Yeah.
On the Lions side, Kenny Golladay was on the injury report this week. He did not practice. I can't remember what it was for, but again, it's Wednesday practice, so just keep an eye on him. He's still not a guy I'm too high on playing. The Vikings are allowing the 3rd fewest points to wide receivers.
And Xavier Rhodes is apparently going to be playing this game too.
Is who is going to cover Golladay. So those Golladay owners, I know he probably came up for you big last week, but I don't know if I'm playing him this week. And then Matt Stafford is another guy I'm not playing. The Vikings are allowing the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. Stafford really hasn't been the Matt Stafford that us fantasy users are used to in the past. So I don't think there are really any Lions you can look at here. Vikings are playing for their playoff lives, so they have to go out there and really take it to the Lions if they're going to win. I think the Vikings defense could be an interesting start because they are really coming on strong of late. They're turning the ball over. They're playing strong defense. If the offense is running the ball and keeping them well rested, then again, they're just an even better unit to go out there. And the Lions really don't have anyone on offense. So, I would say play the Vikings if you have them on defense.
Yeah, we saw this today. Kerryon Johnson was put on IR. Any interest in Zach Zenner? We did see him 10 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. Got targeted 4 times. Any interest there? He actually, I heard he ran more routes than Theo Riddick did.
Huh?
Yeah.
I would say no.
I would agree.
I think you have better options, and we talked about them earlier. And a Jalen Samuels type guy or Damian Williams, you don't need to put your Week 16 championship basket
on Zach Zenner.
With Zach Zenner.
I agree. Moving on to another one of these NFC North, we got the Bears playing at the 49ers. 49ers defense, not all that great. 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So to me, Trubisky is a solid play here. Last week, 235 passing yards on 20 completions, pretty good. 2 touchdowns. And then you look at Jordan Howard here. We've seen in the middle of the season, Tariq Cohen kind of took over. Saw him used a lot more than Jordan Howard, but in these last four of the last 5 games, he's gotten at least 16 carries. He's averaged 75 yards over that stretch. He only had the one touchdown during that stretch, but and only one catch over those in each one of those 4 games. But to me, 20 touches like he got last week, 60 rushing yards, added another 15 receiving yards with a touchdown. To me, that's a pretty decent floor for a flex player. He's not going to give you a huge number, but he's probably not going to give you a dud either. So to me, he's one of the more reliable flex plays here in week 16. However, the better running back to me in this matchup should be Tariq Cohen. The 49ers are tied for the 4th most receptions allowed to running backs. Obviously, that's right up Tariq Cohen's alley. Caught 5 of his 6 targets last week for a touchdown. We've seen him used in the pass game a lot this season. So to me, he's the more solid play at running back. And then we did see that Trey Burton had a pretty good game last week, but he had the touchdown. But looking at this 49ers defense, the one thing they're doing pretty well is actually defending against the tight end, giving up the 10th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Trey Burton has been so inconsistent this year. I'm staying away from him. I think the only other player you can consider is Allen Robinson after getting 7 targets last week. Like I said, 49ers 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So, maybe they get Allen Robinson a little more involved like they've been trying to over these past couple weeks. For the 49ers, Nick Mullins, he's been playing very well. He's been kind of the Cinderella of the quarterback position, at least, as far as backup quarterbacks stepping into a prominent role and being somewhat fantasy relevant.
I mean, he's no Saint Nick Foles, but
right.
Sure, I'll let Nick Mullins be Nick Mullins.
Yeah, he's the second best Nick backup quarterback.
Yeah.
But, we saw a couple weeks ago against the Seahawks put up 400 pass yards. Last week, 275 pass yards with a touchdown on 20 completions. And when you look at the rest of the quarterback position from last week, Nick Mullins is actually, I think, in like the top 10. It was a weird week at quarterback, and Nick Mullins wasn't all that bad, but you can't play him against this Bears defense. Is giving up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks.
No way.
Looking at these running backs, Matt Breida, it's been a tornado of running backs there in for the 49ers. We went from Jerick McKinnon tearing his ACL during the week of fantasy draft season. We saw Mostert come in, have a good couple games in a row, breaks his arm. Breida's in and out all season. Now we have Jeff Wilson after a couple good games, one really nice game against the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. So I don't know what the hell to expect from these running backs, so I'm not starting any of them against this Bears defense that also gives up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to running backs.
Yep.
It's pretty much George Kittle and Dante Pettis if you want to get cute, I guess. He's played actually pretty damn well for them over the past couple weeks. Caught all 5 of his 5 targets for 83 yards. I think going into next season, we're going to see Dante Pettis and Marquise Goodwin as the 2 and 3 receivers to a free agent wide receiver, or maybe somebody comes up in the draft that electrifies the 49ers. But I think Dante Pettis is going to be able to be a reliable receiver for us next year, but not this week.
Not week 16 championships. No. I hope the Bears don't come out flat this week. I know they just clinched the NFC North and were partying it up, but I would hate to see them just come out flat and
in San Francisco.
Yeah, look like a team that isn't ready for the moment yet.
Right.
Like I hope they can realize the moment and the opportunity that they have, especially with the Eagles beating the Rams on Sunday night last week. The Bears can move up to that 2 seed. So, I'd like to see the Bears take that next step and really stay focused on the prize, not just dethroning the Vikings or Aaron Rodgers in the NFC North.
I feel confident in that defense and in Matt Nagy getting the guys ready, saying, hey, boys, we have a chance of getting a first-round bye here, locking up, putting
two games at Soldier Field.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and it's one of those young teams led by a young quarterback, group of, hodgepodge, cast-offs. We got Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel, coming from 2 other NFC teams Allen Robinson coming from the Jaguars and Gabriel coming from the from the Falcons last year.
One off an injury, the other just underutilized, not recognized for the ability.
And Trey Burton too, coming from the world champion Steelers. So
Eagles, but yeah.
Oh, geez, sorry.
It's all right.
Steelers
have so many, so I can understand the mistake.
Yeah, it happens. So I think they're going to come out hungry, man. I think that's an easy win.
Bear down, baby, bear down.
Yeah.
All right, Rams, Cardinals.
Yeah, what do you got, bro?
Rams and Cardinals. Well, for those Gurley owners, this news probably couldn't come at a worse time that Todd Gurley is nursing some injury. It looks like he's going to play, so just keep an eye on him. But I would handcuff him immediately if you haven't done it already. The handcuff I would focus on is John Kelly. Malcolm Brown was the good one, but he broke his arm and he's done. So don't go pick up Malcolm Brown. Go pick up John Kelly, and just keep your eye on Todd Gurley. Again, it looks like he's going to play, but as you saw from the Eagles game on Sunday night, he got banged up a little bit and they took him out of the game. And he really wasn't a factor when he came back in. They really just put him back in as a decoy, in my opinion. So keep your eye on Todd Gurley. Play the Rams defense. Cardinals and Josh Rosen, we just talked about. Josh Rosen is the worst of the rookie quarterbacks. So I'm playing the Rams defense. I'm avoiding Goff. He has really fallen off these last couple weeks. Teams have figured out how to confuse him from a defensive perspective. I would assume the Cardinals would do that again. Their head coach is more of a defensive guy. So hopefully he studied some of the tape of what the Bears and Eagles have done to Jared Goff. So I'm avoiding him. And then the receivers, I'm not thinking, especially because the way Jared Goff is playing, I'm not thinking the receivers are better than a wide receiver 3 or a flex option. So take your pick between, I think Josh Reynolds is someone you can include in it, but Josh Reynolds, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, I'm looking at them as wide receiver 3s and flexes for this week.
Okay. Why? Because of that matchup?
Yeah, just because Jared Goff has done so little these past couple weeks, and he's the guy that's got to get them the football.
Yeah.
And if he's having such a hard time doing that, then those guys are going to suffer on the other end of that situation. And then the Cardinals are just pretty stout against wide receivers and quarterbacks from a defensive perspective. So, again, I think the matchups just aren't there for Goff and the receivers, but it is there in a big way for Gurley. Right. Hopefully he plays and is a full go if he does play, because the Cardinals are allowing the second most points to opposing running backs. On the Cardinals side of the ball, I can't trust anyone except David Johnson. He can maybe be my flex or wide receiver 3. Again, we talk about it with these high-powered offenses. You got to try and keep them off the field, so you want to rely on the running game. I don't even know who their backup is, but I've seen almost too much of that guy the past couple weeks.
Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, so that's what worries me about a David Johnson. But again, all of us draft him for this situation, so put him on your roster in some way in Week 16, whether it's a flex or a secondary or tertiary running back spot. Otherwise, in the Cardinals, they have a Hall of Famer in Larry Fitzgerald that's playing maybe the second to last game of his career.
Maybe the last game in Arizona.
Yeah, last game in Arizona. There are 2 teams in the NFL that Larry Fitzgerald has 18 touchdowns against, the 49ers and the LA Rams. So he knows how to find the end zone against this team, given it used to be in St. Louis, but this game's in Arizona. It's in the desert. Could be potentially, like we just mentioned, Larry's final send-off. So if I was Brian Leftwich and trying to draw up the game plan, my game plan is throw the ball to Larry Fitzgerald anytime I throw the ball, just to let this guy have a good game and go out on top. So
yeah, we saw last week Mike Glennon came in for Josh Rosen, who was struggling so much, and he pretty much solely targeted Larry Fitzgerald. So
it's a smart man.
Yeah, I think they go into this game, and especially if they're losing, like I think me and you both expect they will, then should be a good game for Larry Fitzgerald. Hopefully, a nice game for him to say thanks to all those fans in Arizona.
Rams are just outside the top 10 in points allowed to wide receivers too. So again, Larry Fitzgerald, go do something for your last time in Arizona as a player.
Although Aqib Talib is back now,
yeah,
I think that could end up changing that stat a little bit.
Unfortunately, there's no one else besides Larry Fitzgerald out wide down there, because
there's no one else to throw the ball to.
Christian Kirk is hurt, so
yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned handcuffing Gurley. I think this is one of those situations where it's like you have to decide whether or not the handcuff is good enough to play. Yeah, you know he's going to get that upswing in volume, but is he good enough to produce with that volume? And then you look at the Cardinals defense against running backs, and they've been the best matchup for running backs all season long. Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, if that one league that I am in the championship, I have Todd Gurley. I picked up Kelly, as a backup, and if Gurley misses, I'm going to have to pick between Kelly or Mark Ingram playing the Steelers, who are very tough against running backs.
That's tough choice.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for me there. So I'm hoping that Gurley toughs it out and plays for me. We saw him; he was targeted 13 times last week. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe they don't give him as much work in the run game as he's used to, but they can't get away from using him in the pass game, especially with Cooper Kupp being out and to me, Brandon Cooks is nothing more than a gadget receiver. I think he's shown that as far as consistency goes. It's Robert Woods and it's Josh Reynolds getting 12 targets last week. Yep. He's the most targeted wide receiver for the team. So if Gurley misses, I'm going to be faced with a real tough decision in the championship. Of whether or not to play his backup, which brings up a whole thing about handcuffing running backs, which, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we might do a season closing episode type thing. I might do a little round table, get as many of the guys that have been on the podcast throughout the season back on for one night. So if that happens, definitely keep your eyes open for that, because that'll be fun. And you'll definitely most likely hear us in at least one more daily fantasy lineup episode where we'll talk some playoff matchups and stuff like that. So stay tuned. Keep your eye on the Dudes and Beer lineup here, and might get some more fantasy football analysis from these guys here. So thank you for coming on for week 16. It's been a lot of fun this season, and I'm not going to do a huge wrap-up thing here because I'm going to hope we're going to get another episode in. But I do want to say thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been a blast.
Yeah. So good luck to everybody in Week 16. It's been a great season. It's been a lot of fun. So may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents this week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. To listen to our episodes or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app, available on Android and iDevices, or visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find all of our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors, podcasts, and other content, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app. Thanks for listening, everybody. And until next time, drink responsibly.